Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of what if Deku got a chance to stop chaos from ever happening in the first place. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. What will you do if someone gives you a chance to stop chaos from happening in the first place? The question took Izuku off guard as he had been expecting normal questions that fans usually ask. He gave the man, who seems to be in his 40s, in front of him a smile. Prevention is better than cure, they say. So, I will probably seize the chance with both hands. I hope you really mean it, Hero Deku. The man offered him a hand to shake. Izuku indulged him. As soon as their hands made contact, White consumed his vision as a voice which sounds like the man said, 25 years. Rinse but never repeat, I beg this of you. The last thing Izuku felt was a rough surface under him before he fell unconscious. Izuku opened his eyes to the faint sunlight. The sky was a dark purple canvas. The pro-hero reckoned it might be a late evening or early dawn. The faint sound of waves splashing against the shore almost rocked him back to sleep. Wait, waves. The green-haired man immediately sat up, trying to figure out just why he was near water. The sight of a familiar beach along with piles of trash surprised him. After all, waking up on the messy Dagaba beach, which was still clean when he visited the day before yesterday, was on the list of things Izuku would be surprised by. Staring at the garbage surrounding him, he was relieved that he was not on one of them. There were even some sharp edges sticking out of the piles. Izuku grimaced. Just what happened after he shook hands with that man? Izuku scanned himself for injuries. There were a few torn patches in his costume. One of his arm-bracing gloves was missing along with a good portion of his cape. He is also covered in soot and ash. If there were something on his face, he wouldn't be surprised. All in all, he looked as if he had to go into a flaming building on a good day or a homeless man who chose to cosplay some hero. The hero pulled his gloves off, unclasped his cape, and made a makeshift bag with it. Checking his phone, Izuku is disappointed to find it unresponsive. First, he needed to collect his thoughts and find the best next course of action. Izuku held his chin and thought. This must be the effects of that man's quirk. It was probably displacement through space and possibly time. He recalled what the man's last words were. 25 years. Rinse but never repeat. If his suspicions were correct, he might have even traveled back into the past. 25 years to be exact. Izuku's breathing sped up at the thought of being in the past. This was the whole world of unknown. His vision blurred. His heart seemed to thunder quite uncomfortably against his chest. He knew he was panicking. What was he going to do now? Izuku slapped his face with both hands. This was not how he should be reacting. He is the number 2 pro-hero for goodness' sake. It was more important to analyze the situation without his emotions influencing the thinking process. And this was not the time for panic attacks too. Nothing would be certain until he found undeniable evidence. Then again, the state of the Dagaba beach was tipping the favor towards the time travel theory. Izuku wondered how such a powerful quirk stayed under the radar. It was probably because of just how rare time quirks were. He was really screwed up now, wasn't he? Well, there was no time to idle. Izuku tried to console himself. Standing up, he decided to go to a place he could actually acquire information. There was a convenience store near the beach park from what he remembered. That would be his best bet. He could buy a newspaper or something. Searching his utility belt, Izuku sighed. Thank goodness I remembered to take some money with me. The pro-hero nodded to himself, satisfied with his decision. After washing his face with one of the face wipes that he kept in his belt, the sky lightened as the sun peeked from the horizon. Izuku tried to make himself more presentable, although some dirt remained stubbornly on his suit. Then, he powered up to take a leap before a thought occurred to him. He really should not be using his quirk in public if he were in another timeline without an official hero license. The less he stood out, the better it would be. He still did not know if there were any consequences of showing himself to the people he knew or the younger version of himself. However, considering that Izuku was 27 years old, it would mean the Izuku of this timeline was still a 2-year-old if the man's words were true. The younger him would not be outside at sunrise. Hopefully. So, Izuku didn't have to worry. He started walking, trying to focus on keeping calm. When the man arrived at the store, a banner was over the signboard of the building. It said, Opening Promotion of Dokidoki Convenience Store. It was the name of the store he remembered. If it had been opened just recently, that meant Izuku was indeed in the past. The date from the corner of the banner just proved it. Gradually, the feeling of being underwater consumed him as he gazed up at the words. He walked away from the store even though his legs felt like they had been turned into jelly. Spotting a narrow alleyway, he entered it as he didn't want to break down where people could see him. It would not be wise to show weakness in an unfamiliar environment. Once he was in the alley, which was dark without any direct sunlight, The makeshift bag slipped from his weak fingers. He shakily buried his face in his hands. A headache was already making itself known behind his eyes and on his temples. He had to sit down lest he collapsed. God, he was indeed in the past. How would he go back? Could he even? Thoughts after thoughts, questions after questions passed through his mind as if in sync with the water droplets dripping from some pipes in the alley. Izuku sat there, on the cool cement floor, motionless as a doll whose strings had been cut. After what seemed like an eternity of being prisoned in his own mind with all these thoughts, the overwhelming urge to scream out loud filled him. He didn't. Instead, hot tears trailed down his freckled cheeks. His mother, Toshinori, his friends, the agency, they were going to be worried sick. Izuku let out a soft hiccup. Trying to think rationally just like Aizawa-sensei told them to do, he concluded that at least his disappearance would not be traceless. The man used his quirk on him in broad daylight, in the middle of the street where everyone could see. They would know that he was back in the past, wouldn't they? Therefore, naturally, they would find a way to take him back. I'm so sorry, Mom, Toshinori. Everyone, Izuku whispered into thin air. If only he had been more cautious and vigilant. This would have never happened. It was his own fault. But crying would not solve this mess. The green-haired man tried to regain his calm. There was a particular breathing exercise that he found calming. It was indeed useful for situations like this. His breathing turned back to normal. Although his tears are still running, at least he could see his surroundings. Izuku couldn't really do anything against the infamous Midoriya tears once they started. Although these days, he rarely cried. Becoming a fully fledged pro hero did that to him, he supposed. Not to mention what he had gone through during his high school years. Those times were hectic. Leaning against the wall behind him, the freckled man ran his fingers over the scars on his hands. He had always found the gesture grounding. Seriously, what could he do now? The first thing that came into his mind was to lie low and see if he could get more information about time travel. Maybe the effects were not permanent. Maybe he should seek the man who sent him back. The time quirk user looked like he was in his early 40s, which meant he would be an adolescent in this timeline. Although his face was average looking, there was something notable about his appearance. His left eye. Izuku should have noticed the signs because that unique eye of his actually had two flecks that resembled the hands of the clock. It didn't seem important then. But now he realized it was. Very belatedly, Izuku scowled. Just how unobservant was he? Aizawa-sensei would be ashamed. Lying low would be tough since he didn't have shelter and he really doubted the amount of money that he had would last him more than a week of minimum food and water. Without valid identification, getting even a small part-time job was impossible. There were also other kinds of problems such as how he could obtain more information and how he would stay under both the heroes and the police's radars. It was clear that Izuku needed an ally, someone who was capable of helping him. Someone who he could trust. Toshinori was that someone, but Izuku doubted he could get a hold of the #1 hero of Japan that easily. He could give it a try and pretend to be a fan perhaps. However, it was not like he could stalk Toshinori and ask for help because he was the man's future successor. It would mess up the timeline and change things. Nor could he just march towards his mentor's agency and demand to see him. Who in their right mind would let a suspicious person meet All Might in person? There was also the fact that Toshinori, even though he was the current #1 hero if Izuku calculated right, did not have as much influence and power as he would after being dubbed as the symbol of peace. What Izuku needed now was the solution that was guaranteed to work. Sighing, he wiped the tears off his face. He should decide on something soon without wasting time. What if time passed differently? What if a day in the past equaled to a year or something in his original timeline? His thoughts were interrupted as his stomach was reminding him to get some food. It was time for breakfast. Walking back to the Dokidoki 24-hour store, he purchased a curry bun and a bottle of water with some discount. Thankfully, the shopkeeper didn't think he was a hero. Otherwise, he would be uncomfortable buying these with a discount. There was a park near the store. Izuku headed there and sat on a bench that was quite secluded due to it being behind a big tree instead of facing the road. The curry bun was spicier than he expected, just as spicy as Kachin would have liked. He really hoped the other pro hero was managing their agency well in his absence. Izuku felt sorry for leaving him alone to deal with the press and everything that Izuku's disappearance might have created. He really needed to find a way to go back. After finishing the bread and sipping on some water, the man stored the bottle and his very few belongings in the plastic bag the store gave him. More people appeared as it was the time when most started their day. But Izuku just sat there and thought about what he could do. Somewhat unbelievably, contacting Toshinori would not be a wise decision. By the time the noon came around, Izuku had a decent plan in mind, so he started walking towards his destination. The UA gate was still impressive even though it was not as advanced as its counterpart in the future and even though Izuku was older. The green-haired man worried his lower lip as he observed it from afar. The school had already let out and he saw teachers and heroes leaving, so Izuku reckoned there were only a couple of teachers and Nezu left in the compound. Staring creepily at the school would probably raise some suspicions if someone noticed. However, the real obstacle was how to enter the school without using his quirk. Sure, he could use 75% full cowling to sprint through the gate easily, but someone could see him. If Izuku remembered right, Nezu would have already been the principal of the school for about a year currently in this timeline. Even before obtaining the position, the creature had power among the Hero Society to some extent due to his intelligence, albeit not publicly. Therefore, the Hero Commission chose to make him the principal of UA where they could regulate him rather than leave Nezu unchecked. Not that they succeeded in doing so. That was one of the reasons Izuku respected the principal, and now, that was the reason why he believed he could request some assistance from him. Moreover, if there were anyone who could find a way to reverse the time travel, it would be Nezu. Two heads were better than one, especially if one head had high specs. The man edged towards the barrier, wanting to see if there were any security cameras installed, because he suspected Nezu, even though not all the time, liked to check the cameras personally unless he had more important matters to attend to. Therefore, it was only a matter of if the cameras had already been placed in this timeline. If he stood in the view of one, the principal would probably notice him and become curious. Then, hopefully, the man would let him in or send someone to get him. Were there any specific spot that the creature liked to check? Izuku tried to recall anything relevant. Rubbing his lower lip with his index finger, he brightened as the answer came to his mind. There was actually an entrance for only heroes teaching at UA. Toshinori had used that once or twice during one of Izuku's visits. He hoped he got it right. The entrance was hiding in plain sight. Hence, a random civilian knowing its location would catch Nezu's attention for sure. More than an hour later, Izuku was still sitting there with no signs of contact from Nezu. The time traveler groaned softly. People who passed him gave him weird stares. It was even nearly sunset for goodness' sake. Of all times to get unlucky, it had to be the one time he really hoped for luck. Izuku had half the mind to just storm in using one for all, consequences be damned. He stared directly at the security camera. I need your help, Nezu. It is really important, before grimacing. That attempt was pathetic. He was not sure if the cameras had sound recognition. What should he do now? There might be some paper and a mini pen in his belt because he liked to be able to take notes even while he was on patrol. Izuku knew what he was going to do next would be of more risk, but that way, the principal was more likely to notice him. Suddenly, he felt like one of those anime girls saying, "Notice me, senpai." He held up the paper in a way that the words on it would be visible in the video recording while revealing his face as well. One for all for one. I need help, Nezu. Then, the sun went down. The streetlights illuminated the night, but Izuku knew his message couldn't be seen if in the dark. Disappointed, he lowered his arm. He would just have to try the next day. Although he could just get into the school with his quirk, he didn't want to trigger the school's alarms. He hadn't even had dinner. Another cheap onigiri like the one he had as lunch would suffice to last him the night. He should also purchase some energy bars too. And most importantly, find somewhere to sleep. A cough sounded from his left. Izuku stopped his muttering, which he was unknowingly doing. Whipping his head towards the direction of the sound, relief filled him. A white furry creature was standing there, just outside the teacher's entrance. In other words, his plan succeeded. Izuku had probably been staring without any words for far too long. Rubbing his nape, he meekly said, You saw my message. What a nice way to make an impression, Midoriya." Nezu just gave him a small smile and nodded. "I think it will be best if we take this discussion inside." He gestured towards Izuku towards the entrance. Izuku followed the principal into the school. They passed familiar yet foreign hallways and finally, they arrived at Nezu's office. Nezu unlocked it by scanning his paw on a sensor beside the door handle. "Come in, please." The green-haired man remained silent even after the principal told him to take a seat on the sofa in the office. All the words he planned to say to Nezu escaped him the moment he entered the office for some reason. He blamed it on his increasing anxiety as he couldn't help but worry what if the creature didn't believe him and the fact he was from the future. The older Nezu he knew was a close friend of Izuku's, mainly because they had these talks about quirks, politics, and other things which tended to turn into impromptu debates and analysis. The principal retired when Izuku was around 24, but he was still someone to go to when the young hero needed some advice. "Nezu, how would you immediately know if someone was trustworthy or not?" The creature hummed, pouring more tea into his own cup. "Interesting question. What spurred this on, Midoriya?" Izuku put down his cup before answering, "I was just thinking. You would never know what will happen in the future. I sometimes stay up late, making up various scenarios where I have to pass on one for all to another person. They're just hypothetical musings, of course." The man smiled, embarrassed. "But it'd be a mess if I wouldn't have any time to explain it properly to that person. So, you want to know how can that person acquire assistance from me should you not able to provide it?" With Nezu, he didn't have to explain his thought process that much. No one had to really. The creature just had really great intuition. That or he had very precise predictions. Izuku nodded to what the other stated. Nezu gave him an almost smirk smile. Bold of you to assume I'd be there after you passed on your quirk. Old age is catching up with me even now, Midoriya. But you are still up and kicking. Izuku responded, chuckling a bit. I'm just wondering, just in case. The 10th user could just explain their situation to me. Surely I would have understood what had transpired. Nezu adjusted the monocle he wore on his scarred eye. For some reason, his right eye needed vision enhancement due to the injury he suffered and his increasing age. The principal chose the monocle instead of glasses, which definitely was a very Nezu thing to do. Of course, he would rather wear a thing of the past, even long before the era of quirks. Isn't there a way that's more certain? Izuku wondered out loud. Nezu hummed, I suppose there is. I'd prefer if you only use it when absolutely necessary. The question interrupted what he had been thinking. Izuku nodded, thank you. He observed the creature preparing it across the room. Soon, they were quietly sipping from their respective cups. It was chamomile. He glanced at Nezu. The young pro-hero didn't really know why he was hesitating to start the conversation. The creature just studied him back, clearly wanting him to make the first move. I am not one of his followers, Izuku blurted out. I'm a pro-hero actually. The reason why I needed your help is not really related to All for One directly, but then again, I guess it is related in some way. The last part trailed into a mutter, but Nezu heard that. Nezu put down his cup. From what I've researched, you are not a pro-hero. The green-haired male tensed. Well, not yet. You see, Izuku started before clearing his throat. I'm from the future. I know it is hard to believe. My name is Midoriya Izuku and I've been a pro-hero for a decade now. A man used his quirk on me and sent me back 25 years into the past. The creature clasped his paws together, his onyx eyes observing the man's body language and expressions very closely. It was obvious that he was trying to figure out if Izuku was to be trusted. I'm afraid I will need more evidence, Midoriya. Izuku frowned thoughtfully. How about if I say that Shimura Nana was the 7th user of One for All and the first was All for One's own brother? Nezu asked for more as the information he gave could be what All for One told him to gain the hero's trust. You have one more chance until I call All Might to capture you. Time travel is a complicated concept. The young man gaped before schooling his features again. Of course, Nezu wouldn't believe a suspicious man claiming to be a hero from the future, especially if said man was spouting off information that they knew All for One was aware of also. Should he just say that particular phrase? Your time is running out, please hurry up. Showing his face to All Might would be a disaster considering that he was his successor. That was the reason why he didn't go to his mentor in the first place. He had to get Nezu's trust right now. Izuku looked into the creature's eyes and uttered, the sun shines brightest during the eclipse. The other ceased moving, his face morphing into an impassive one. Black eyes glinted, trained on the freckled man across him yet far away at the same time as if he was remembering a thing of his past. Izuku was starting to think he said something wrong. Excuse me, would you mind repeating that? Izuku did as he was requested, saying the unique sentence again. Nezu's eyes fell to the teacup he put down, clearly considering the words. Did my future counterpart tell you that? Izuku nodded. The principal nodded twice before his usual smile appeared on his face once again. Interesting. Very well, how can I help you? A relieved smile bloomed on Izuku's face. He thought for a second there, he was going to be arrested or something. Thank you, Nezu. I was wondering if you know someone or something that can reverse the time travel. I do not belong in this timeline. I was hoping to go back before I break an unspoken rule of time travel. You must be worried that you will mess up the future by being here. Nezu filled Izuku's cup as it was empty. However, I'm afraid I have never heard of a way to send people back into the future. Izuku slumped at the principal's admission. He was kind of expecting that. Time-related quirks and time traveling, in general, were complex and rare. But who could blame him for hoping? If you let me, I'm sure we can find a way to go back to the future, Nezu offered. It'll be an interesting challenge. The creature's grin stretched wider. Relief filled Izuku. Thank you, Nezu. A growl slipped out of Izuku's stomach, making the green-haired man blush with embarrassment. Nezu just chuckled and said that they should solve that first as it was indeed time for a meal before any further discussion. Izuku approached the checkout counter with a basket filled with groceries. It had been a week since he traveled back into the past. Both the freckled man and the principal had been trying to find a way to reverse it. But of course, the endeavor itself was not easy enough to achieve in only 1 week. There was also the problem of Izuku living in this timeline, however temporary this might be. He still needed shelter, food, clothes, and money. But most important of all, a fake identity. Apparently, it was easy to create a whole new person who had official documents, an identification card, medical history, and so on, but no relatives or family members if you were the most intelligent being in the whole country. Izuku suspected not every method Nezu used was legal. He even forged a certificate of heroic training for adults, enabling the now black-haired man to be able to take the provisional license exam if he wished. He did plan to take it as the exam was quite coincidentally only 3 days away. Thankfully, the registration was still open. Otherwise, Izuku would have to wait for months. Since the Hero Commission took video evidence of the applicants taking the exam, Nezu couldn't just make a hero license for Izuku. They thought that getting a hero license was worth it. Both of them knew that having the status of hero would make searching for the man who sent Izuku back easier. Naturally, they decided that it would be best if Izuku worked as an underground hero. Nezu and Izuku had already ordered his hero costume, which was a darker, sleeker version of his old one with no cape and some additional gadgets. Of course, his quirk was registered under a different name, Energy to be precise, so that he could use Black Whip, Float, and Strength without being suspected. The same couldn't be said for the rest of his quirks though. The only thing Izuku did not like about the whole situation was that Nezu now knew Izuku's real name. The fact that he was apparently close to the future version of the principal and knew the history of One for All, and his quirk having multiple aspects. Of course, the creature understood that Izuku could not offer him more in-depth info about the future, making it easier for both of them. But still, the fact that Nezu knew things about the future was there. However, he couldn't very well complain now, could he? Because the principal offered him a place to stay and even opened him a small bank account so that he could buy necessary things. Therefore, here he was in civilian clothes, dressed in neutral colors as not to stand out much. In his hands was a simple debit card, waiting to pay for the grocery. He was in a shopping mall near UA. The least the freckled man could do for Nezu was buying groceries for both him and the creature and aiding the principal in finding the time quirk user. Izuku couldn't help but feel like a burden to the principal. But the other kept insisting it was not a burden to help him, and sending back into the future would be an interesting challenge. One that he didn't mind. The time traveler left the mall and started walking back to UA. But then, Izuku's day decided to cease being simple and boring. His world became fuzzy. It was bad enough for him to stop even though he was in the middle of a wide yet busy street. Izuku brought a hand up to massage his temple. He closed his eyes for a moment, when the green eyes opened once again. Not only glitches had entered his vision, but also it seemed like he was seeing doubles. People around him flickered as if they were rapidly switching between being invisible and not. Colors and shapes overlapped to form a barely distinguishable sight. The digital billboard across the street, which had been playing weather news just a moment ago, flashed into a news report for the disappearance of the number 2 hero. Deku confessed that he sent a sudden static sound in his ears made him miss the words after that. However, with the influence of the latest version of Trigger, it is possible that Deku might even be an entirely different. What in the world was he hearing? Are you okay? Izuku looked at the woman who asked with concern, the one from the world he was currently in, and slurred, "I'm fine." He must have collapsed as he caught a glimpse of the pavement below him. His vision changes again, the pain behind his eyes worsening. A pair of mother and child appeared just a few meters from his left with an occasional glitch. "Mommy, what happened to Deku?" Izuku tried to keep track of what they were saying. He must have established a connection with his original timeline somehow. The woman, who could only be the child's mother, knelt in front of her daughter, the Deku plushie in her arms slipping in and out of focus. "A bad man glitched to a faraway place, sweetie. But don't you worry, Deku will." Izuku let out a whimper as his headache became more severe. The static sounds got worse, making the dark-haired man's ears ring. But he was on the brink of consciousness. The kind woman who asked if he was okay appeared to be calling 119 for an ambulance. He could barely make out what the lady from his original timeline said next. After all, he's the symbol of hope. Then Izuku passed out from the sheer pain and fatigue that consumed him. A white ceiling that greeted Izuku when he opened his eyes again. Obviously, he was in a hospital. Maybe. Hospitals had a thing for him regardless of the time or the place. Groaning, he tried to sit up. A tug of pain made him look at his forearm. He probably moved the needle of the drip or something. At least, they might have given him a dose of painkillers as the headache was barely present, overtaken by a feeling that the man had always associated with painkillers. This time travel business was not making his life easier. Well, he now knew he could apparently have visions of his original timeline. Not that he was complaining. He should probably write down what he heard and seen as soon as possible. He hoped he wouldn't forget. Those words were too important to be forgotten. For one, the others back at home were indeed aware of his disappearance. The man who sent him into the past had been caught according to how the news was worded. Also, there was something about Trigger which was frankly concerning. Izuku frowned. This could be bad. Trigger was known to enhance the user's quirk, but the latest version of it did not have as much effect on one's self-control as its prototypes back when he was still in UA. But they are a tad stronger. The part about entirely different was more concerning, especially if the last word was what Izuku thought it might be. Dimension. If he was in another dimension, would he even be able to go back to his original one, let alone back to the time he was supposed to be in? The thought of failure was chilling. "Ah, you're awake, I see." A doctor entered the hospital room. Izuku inquired him where he was. The other man answered, "You are at the Musutafu General. You arrived unconscious. The witnesses say that you were clenching your head. So, some scans have already been run just in case, but I'm afraid we did not find anything suspicious." Izuku nodded along as he listens to what the other said. The dark-haired man was thankful that the vision didn't cause any permanent injuries. However, the pain during it was intense. "So, am I allowed to leave now?" The other smiled at him. "Yes, Akatani. Also, we alerted your emergency contact, Nezu from UA. Are you a hero though?" It was indeed strange to be addressed with a different name, as Nezu still called him Midoriya unless they were in public, which was rare. Izuku gave the doctor an awkward laugh. "Actually, I am not." Yes, it was true. He was not a hero. Yet, even if he had received the license, he would not be doing anything that might link his civilian name with his hero name. He had learned a thing or two about underground heroics from Aizawa-sensei. Pardon my assumption." The man closed the report on his condition and put it back into its place. "You came in as an emergency patient, as extreme headaches can be caused by many severe reasons." The doctor informed him, "But due to your blood pressure and sugar level being normal, we concluded that there is no danger. You will be fine with proper rest and diet. I'll take my leave now. A nurse will come to help you with the checking out. Good day to you, Akatani." Thankfully, it turned out he didn't lose his groceries. Nezu was there to take him back to UA when he got out of the hospital. The creature gestured him to take the front seat as Izuku approached the black car which was parked in the parking lot of the hospital. He never knew the principal drove. But then again, he had seen a car in Nezu's garage when he visited the man after he retired in the future. Or was he supposed to refer it as the past? Anyway, Izuku got into the car. "Sorry for making you come here." The principal said that it was okay since his work hours were over. "What happened?" "They said you were unconscious with a possible head injury. Then, you called me on my way here." Nezu fished out a thermos from out of nowhere and filled the cup attached to it with tea. Izuku refused the offer though. There was apparently another spare cup in the car. It reminded him of how much Aizawa drank coffee. "I think I had some kind of vision as to what's happening in my original timeline. After that, I lost consciousness." Izuku frowned and thought. Nezu's eyes widened by a fraction. Before Izuku could continue, the creature held up a hand. "Then, we shall discuss it back at my quarters in the UA compounds. It is more private there." Izuku spent the car ride back to UA pondering on the meaning of the words he heard. "Are you sure you heard the last word clearly?" Nezu questioned after Izuku finished explaining what had transpired that evening. "It is important to get the facts right before we consider the variables." The man nodded in response. "I think so. I heard the first syllable die, but then the static sound interrupted the word." Nezu hummed with a thoughtful expression on his face. Izuku remained in silence with his own thoughts. He traced the scars on his hands, anticipating the creature's opinion, as it would be nice to see what the most intelligent individual in Japan thought about this whole vision distortion thing. "Midoriya, may I know more about this trigger you mentioned?" "To my knowledge, there are only mild quirk-amplifying drugs. Therefore, trigger is something from the future, isn't it?" The principal started. Izuku didn't want to reveal too much about the future, but this was related to the time travel. "So," he answered, "trigger gives the user's quirk a very significant boost, but at first, it simultaneously weakens their sense of reason, making them lash out. However, its latest version doesn't affect the mental state." Green eyes narrowed as they gazed at his hands. "The only irregularity of it is that sometimes, the quirk gets slightly mutated, although the mutation is not entirely different." Nezu blinked at the last sentence. "Mutations, you say? That might be problematic. Are they permanent?" "No, only under the effect of the drug. It does not happen all the time, also, appearing in 15% of the users." Izuku's heart froze as he caught on to the implication of this. Since the mutation was not permanent and rarely occurred another time, had the man who sent him experienced this, he might not be able to go back even if he found the man's younger self in this world. The fact that Trigger was involved alone lessened his chances of being able to reverse this just by requesting the help of the one in this timeline. His face fell into an expression that reminded him of the times back when Shigaraki and All for One were at large. A numb, hardened mask. "This is not the time to break down. You have realized what this might mean, haven't you?" The principal pursed his lips. "The quirk that sent you back must have mutated under the drug's influence and somehow messed up something during the process of sending you back into the past." Izuku nodded along. Nezu continued, sensing that the man was not going to talk. "Since you are indeed 25 years back into the past, the place you got sent to might be wrong. It seems that the people from your original timeline also realized it, unless the last word was not what we suspected it was." The black-haired man looked at Nezu in the eyes. "So, do you still think that we can find a way to get back to my world as well as to the time I'm supposed to?" The glint in his green eyes was indicating that the man expected a logical and truthful answer. "I am not sure, since such a solution might exist somewhere and I am not aware of it," Nezu sighed. The other man's face was still set. However, although I had an unconfirmed lead for the time travel, I'm afraid that I have never heard of dimension travel. Honestly, Izuku had been expecting this. If he was truly in another reality, it would be difficult to go back to the correct one since there might be other worlds too. It would not be logical to risk traveling into the wrong reality in time. At the same time, it would be against his very nature to lose hope. After all, he was still Midoriya Izuku Aka, Deku, the symbol of hope, the number 2 hero of Japan. With that thought, Izuku gave the principal a determined grin, making the principal blink due to the sudden change. But that doesn't mean I will stop looking for a way to go back. I'd like to request further help, Nezu. And the hero got a smile from the creature in return. You don't have to request my help again, Midoriya. Then, Nezu's smile became sharper on the edges. So, does a different dimension mean whatever you do here doesn't affect your original one? Oh, the principal was smiling his scheming smile. Izuku might have an inkling about what they would discuss next. He nodded, possibly. Are you, by any chance, thinking what I think you are? Changing this world with Izuku's knowledge about his own, preventing the chaos from ever happening in the first place, and possibly saving many lives in the process. Only if you want to, of course. From what you've said so far, the future seems bleak if my world is anything like yours. A tint of sadness entered the principal's gaze. I can't, in good conscience, not do anything when I know that there is a possibility of a disaster. The principal clasped his paws together. I might be asking a lot from you. However, let's see whether our worlds are similar, and if so, would you mind lending a hand with your knowledge, Midoriya? Izuku mused that even though he couldn't save Shigaraki from All for One's hands sooner in his original timeline, it would be great to save the one from this timeline. He quickly did the calculations in his head. Since Shigaraki was 4 years older than Izuku, he would be around 6 in this dimension. He would be just a child. His heart felt quite heavy at the realization, for that was around the time young Tenko's quirk activated and killed his family. If fate was on his side, the boy might not even have met All for One. Every misfortune he couldn't prevent, every pain he couldn't ease, every single life he couldn't save, maybe he could with this chance. Although he did not belong in this world, although it could change the future of this dimension, for the better or the worse, Izuku didn't really know, but it wouldn't hurt to give it a try, would it? If it turned out that he could never go back to his world, wouldn't it be great to help this reality? I'd like to help this world if I can. After all, saving people, no matter where they are, even though you aren't supposed to meddle with their business, is an essence of being a hero. Izuku felt nostalgic at the words of his mentor. His eyes shone. So, when do we start? The man was eager to help. It was not like he was running away from the fact that he might never be able to go back to his world and hope that if he didn't acknowledge it, it would cease to exist. Of course not. It was just that his hero instincts were kicking in. It really was. The principal's smile turned thankful but concerned, even though the dark-haired man didn't catch the latter. How about you stay for dinner this evening? We can discuss this tomorrow. You might want to rest. Oh, that reminds me. I went to buy groceries. Is Katsuden fine for you, or do you have a special dietary plan? Izuku asked the other. Nezu hummed. No, I can have most of the human food. Let's head to the kitchen. I hope you don't mind helping. I can't really cook many dishes even with all the intelligence I've got from my quirk. I think your future version, or rather, the you from my world, once implied that. Izuku chuckled lightly as they both stood up. The freckled man reckoned he would just deal with the turn of events that his vision revealed later in private. He wouldn't want the principal to see him break down, as he suspected the creature might be uncomfortable in that kind of situation. Emotions were not his strongest aspect. He really hoped he could remember his mother's recipe. It would be great to have a dish of katsuden just as tasty as his mother's. It was great to see them again. Izuku sighed as he gazed into the dark, the room suddenly becoming hot even though it was not in reality. Just like he saw his mother, Toshinori and Kaken, eating a meal together with him even though it was just a dream conjured by his subconsciousness. But all of them looked really happy. They had dinner together at his mother's once a week. Izuku and Katsuki would make time for that even if they were busy with hero work. Toshinori lived in the neighborhood, so it was not a hassle for the older man to come to Inko's house. Sometimes, Shoto or the Bakugos might pop in too. Izuku felt a bit cheerful already at the memory. Those were really good times. The good times that he might never have again. All because he managed to mess up and land himself in another dimension. The man sighed into the silence of the night. He knew that he should be sleeping. It was only 3 a.m. for goodness' sake. In the morning, he also had to meet with Nezu to come up with a plan to change the future of this world. What would they be doing in his original dimension? Was everyone even alright? He wanted to believe that someday he would find a way to go back. Really, he did, but that was just wishful thinking. After all, how would he travel back to his original reality? There was no power capable of such feat. The one which caused him to come here in the first place wasn't even supposed to do that. The room was cast in a dim glow of his quirk. Izuku might have activated his quirk unconsciously. It tended to happen when he got emotional. The hero stopped his quirk and got out of the bed, heading to the bathroom. Trying to sleep again would be fruitless. He yawned as he made his way to the mirror. If he was going to wake up, he was going to wake up properly. He took a look at his face in the mirror. To his slight dismay, there were apparently tear tracks on it. He didn't even notice that he was crying. Seriously, crying was no help. Tears wouldn't send him back to where he belonged. Sleepily splashing water on his face and then grabbing his toothbrush and toothpaste, he couldn't help but stare at the reflection again. There were already the beginnings of dark circles under his green eyes. The freckles were standing out harshly against his complexion. This appearance was no longer strange for Izuku, as he even pulled all-nighters if his hero work was particularly demanding. That was also what he looked like some time back in high school too. The only major change was his hair. He now had a different identity. Might as well look like it. Akutani Mikumo, age 27, a green-eyed, dark-haired man with an energy quirk that allowed him to enhance his body functions, emit lightning and black whips of energy. He had already graduated from college and recently finished his hero training. Also an applicant of the hero license exam, which was going to be held in the next 2 days. He was not really worried about the exam. Obviously, he would not fail it. However, it would be rather enlightening to operate as an underground hero. Would he meet some familiar faces? There was no way he would meet Aizawa, as the teacher was still a student at UA, a third year if Izuku presumed right. It would be weird to see a high schooler version of his grumpy homeroom teacher. He quickly finished his morning routines. It was almost 4 in the morning. Going on a run seemed like a good way to pass time. He liked morning runs. Soon, he was out, running in the nearby neighborhood. The run helped a little to clear his mind and pondered on what he should try to change. Were a problem to be solved, one should eliminate its roots. The root of the disaster during his younger years was the villain, All for One. But Izuku doubted that he could just take on the villain. There were 2 reasons why he should not. Firstly, he only had a little information about All for One's past. Since this world's All Might hadn't fought with him, there wouldn't be any injury to hold him back. Although his version of One for All was stronger than Toshinori's, the 9th user didn't think he would be able to finish the villain off without attracting the public's attention. Izuku had always wondered how Toshinori kept their fight under wraps, a fight that legendary would be hard to cover up. There was also the problem of finding the villain. Another reason was that he didn't want to get in the way of Toshinori's duty as the 8th One for All user. This world's One for All had never trumped its nemesis. He really thought fighting All for One and coming out victorious, well, thinking he was victorious, must have helped Toshinori somehow. After all, that despicable man killed his mentor's master, Shimura Nana, and all the users before Toshinori. Izuku might even be able to make sure All for One died for good or finish the villain off himself without letting All Might know. The man hummed. That was a usable plan, but it was a time-specific one. He needed something he could do or start doing right now. Therefore, the next preferable course of action would be to save Shigaraki, or rather, Tenko, from that vile villain, which was admittedly easier than confronting All for One. After all, he would still be a young child, not the unhinged adolescent Izuku met at the USJ. Deku was good with children, though he would have to find a way to snatch the child from the villain if it turned out he was already with All for One. Izuku winced at the thought. At least, he now had a decision on what to discuss with Nezu later in the day. It wouldn't be hard to search for a family if they had the full name of the father, would they? After all, Shimura Kotaro was just a normal man with a normal family without any means to stay under the radar of the principal of UA. Now, if only fate would have it, Izuku might even be able to prevent Tenko's quirk from going wild in the first place. But of course, fate was not on Izuku's side. Midoriya Izuku was indeed an interesting individual. Ah, Midoriya. Punctual as usual, I see. Have a seat. Perhaps that was the reason why Nezu's counterpart in another world trusted him enough to tell that particular phrase. The phrase that the creature would always hear when he was back in that place. However, those words reminded him of the only positive aspect of his time there. Well, back to the topic at hand. He couldn't help but be curious about the time traveler who was also possibly a dimension hopper. The man was often upbeat and youthful, but his green eyes told the story of a seasoned pro. Nezu would have to be blind to not see the sadness in them and the 2 perfect smiles Midoriya tended to give sometimes. Just like when he told the principal about a boy who was not saved by the heroes when he needed them the most. Just like when the black-haired man told him that said boy was snatched and manipulated by All for One of all people to become a perfect villain. A successor nurtured into villainy who was also the grandson of All Might's mentor. Nezu had already found Shimura Tenko's family. That was why he had called Midoriya to his office this fine afternoon. Well, to be frank, he had known about the Shimuras as soon as he started searching for them. The furry being didn't tell Midoriya immediately, as the other was busy with the license exam and trying to cope with the recent news of his visit to this world. But of course, he made sure to gather extra information to compensate for the delay. Otherwise, the 3 days that had passed would be wasted. Time was better off unwasted, without a good reason. Good afternoon, Nezu. The man gave him a polite nod. He was in his hero costume, likely for the meeting he would have to attend in the evening. Midoriya, or rather Akatani in the eyes of the law, passed the hero license exam with top marks in the whole country. Some were definitely questioning why he chose to be an underground hero while he would clearly do well as a daytime one. There were also a couple of forums on the Hero Network talking about him. But of course, due to the nature of underground heroes, only his hero name was mentioned. The energy hero, Zeal. Oh, Nezu had seen the video record of the exam. Considering that the freckled man had a decade of experience under his belt from the looks of it, it was not surprising that he put up a rather brilliant performance. He did well even though he was not using the energy whip aspect of his quirk. The creature was really curious about it too. It had interesting properties, almost as if there were more than one quirk in play. Most would be terrified to face him in a dark alley. The principal almost pitied the criminals that would come across the hero. How was your first patrol as an underground hero? Midoriya quirked his lips. It was enlightening. But as a newbie hero, I also had to hold back. It would be suspicious if I caught a lot of criminals from the start. I aimed for the first place in the exam only to gain permission to start off as an independent hero and not as a sidekick. Yes, it would be difficult for you to find the Shimura boy were you not independent. Nezu finished making tea. At this point, the other man just accepted the offer every time he meets the principal. It had been great to know that most of their tastes align, which was probably a result of his interaction with the other Nezu in his original world. The black-haired man nodded. Everything would be difficult for me if you didn't choose to help me. Thanks again, Nezu. This is the 17th time that you thanked me for helping you, Midoriya. There really is no need for that. The human flushed at the creature's words. It was fascinating how he still sometimes acted like a carefree person even though in reality he was anything but. Nezu was grateful to see that. This man was still standing, even though he was thrown into a whole new world, even though he lost his loved ones in the process. But of course, the mental breakdown part would hit him hard when the man actually allowed it to. Nezu didn't miss how the man never showed negative emotion in public or to others. That was probably something he should help the man with. The high-specs user smiled at the man, giving him a few seconds to recollect himself. However, he should just go straight to the point. I've got news for you. I found the Shimuras, but I'm afraid they are already discovered to be dead. Midoriya immediately became serious and businesslike. I see. Do you have the exact date, sir? 5 days ago. Nezu took notice of how the man's breath hitched. They had been hoping to save the whole family and spare the poor child the trauma of being the reason why his family was dead. So 6 days after I arrived here. Midoriya's face was neutral but his eyes showed the sorrow that most would miss. He mumbled, I wonder if that man intentionally sent me before it happened. If so, then I doubt the man knew this event happened, let alone the date of their deaths. Midoriya, no need to feel guilty. The black-haired man sitting across him certainly had a kind soul, albeit a tired one. He had what it took to be a hero even though he sometimes cared too much about other people. The creature suspected that this habit of his had been there for the majority of his life, almost like a certain hero he knew. Green eyes were looking down at the floor. Of course, it would be illogical to, said the man. A surprising fact that Nezu discovered after interacting with Midoriya is that although he seemed like the type to rush into things, he also had a good head on his shoulders. He was good at analyzing and strategizing too, from what Nezu gathered after hours of searching together for a way for him to go back to his own world or recently, a way to save the Shimura boy and hopefully change the world for the better. Do you think All for One has already taken him? It would not be good news if that was the case, Midoriya inquired. The principal hummed, I don't think so. You said that the heroes never saved the Shimura boy. Therefore, to manipulate a child to believe that and hate heroes, a villain like All for One would have waited for a while before taking him in. However, on the other hand, child trafficking is very common in the district he lived in. What if it was the child trafficking rings that led the child to All for One back in Midoriya's world? Then, I might be able to find Shigaraki Tenko before him. May I know where his family lived? I can probably try to look for him during patrol or even in the daytime. Nezu knew he would offer to do that. So, to make up for withholding this knowledge, he had done everything he could to pinpoint the location where little Shimura could be. And so, he informed all his findings to the freckled man. After saying all that needed to be said, Midoriya gave him a small smile. Thank you. I'll try to save the boy. It is, after all, the first step of our plans. I must be going now. Oh, one thing before you leave, Nezu called out as the man stood up. Take these. I think you would make good use of them. I arranged a packet of light food for when you find little Shimura. Also, this is a tracker. The man accepted the offered things. A tracker, just in case you needed to track something. Just fasten it on clothing or a hard surface to activate it. I connected its system to your cell phone. Nothing expensive for it's a thing that the support course recently invented. The man nodded along with his explanation, inspecting the tiny device. Thanks, Nezu. I should go now. Good day to you. Nezu would have also included an emergency kit if the other didn't already have it in his utility belt. He said goodbye to Midoriya with his usual smile. It'd be great if the Shimura boy was discovered as soon as possible. Saying that and looking back at his actions, it was admittedly illogical of him to delay this. But then again, he had an inkling that it should be Midoriya who saved little Tenko with how eager he appeared to do so. An inkling that could not be explained by logic. Mirai was an independent hero, no longer a sidekick to a semi-limelight hero as he had been 3 years after graduation. He had 4 years of being a hero of the agency he worked as a sidekick to. Semi-limelight heroes were those who were not often publicly well known but also not classified as underground heroes. They could choose to be one though, but most just worked together with both the underground and the limelight heroes, just like he did. This was his first meeting in the underground hero business though. He looked forward to seeing how the underground operated. For the new batch of heroes, this meeting was the second one they had after taking the license exam, mainly for clearing up any confusion and helping them adapt to the hero society as a whole. The meeting room was filled with interesting people of varied age groups such as a few high school graduates, some older but new underground heroes, and the more experienced ones who would be showing how the Underground Hero Association operates, all dressed in their hero costumes. Mirai took his assigned seat and patiently waiting for the meeting to start. Boredom led him to analyze the person sitting next to him subtly. He was clad in a dark green jumpsuit with a hood and a utility belt. Dark gloves trailed up to his elbows, looking sleek and thin but sturdy. A quick glance at the man revealed a set of glinting green eyes. To Nighteye, he appeared to be slightly tense. Probably a new hero who passed the recent hero license exam for adults. But wouldn't one be tense if they were sitting together with someone who died 12 years ago? One thing was certain. The fact that the Foresight hero would never know even though it was associated with the future and time. The green-haired man was never the one to talk much, but something about the man beside him made him want to say something to him. His aura was strangely compelling. Good evening. The hooded hero turned to him, freckles visible now that he was facing Mirai. Ah, good evening. Mirai wondered just why he greeted the man while it was not his nature to make small talk. Well, there was no harm in broadening one's network, was there? Since he started the conversation, he might as well introduce himself. The name's Sir Nighteye. I'm a semi-limelight hero, but I'm curious about how the underground works. Nice to meet you. He offered a hand. The black-haired man blinked as if surprised, but he shook the hand not so long after. Likewise. I'm Zeal, a rookie. This is my second day of work, you see. He directed a small smile at Mirai. It somehow reminded him of All Might's, which was confounding as the two couldn't be more different. Ah, you must be the first place winner in the latest hero license exam. With an energy-type quirk, or so I heard. Yes, that would be me. Mirai was also included in those who wondered why such a quirk would go underground. It was only fair to inform the black-haired man of his own quirk. After all, it would be awkward otherwise. That was an unspoken etiquette of this quirked society. My quirk is Foresight, not very useful for combat admittedly. Something flashed through the green eyes and Zeal spoke seriously. I doubt that. There are many benefits in predicting what the future will be. That split-second advantage must be precious in combat. Mirai opened his mouth to say thanks and continue their conversation when an older hero called their attention and announced that the meeting was starting. So the two men nodded to each other and ended their interaction. Mirai thought it was a waste that he didn't have any opportunity to converse with Zeal even after the meeting ended. But well, maybe they would meet again. Just as expected but not ideal, Midoriya came back empty-handed that night. It was the first time searching for the child, so Nezu just told the now underground hero not to be disappointed. However, even though the man was indeed disappointed, determination and hope shone in his viridian eyes. Nezu smiled wider after noticing that the world was a terrible place. That was what he learned at the mere age of 6. However, as weak and helpless as Tenko was, there was nothing he could do. He really hated being this weak, this helpless. His fingers automatically scratched his neck in distress. There was also another thing that Tenko learned. He was equally terrible. It had been 6 days since that happened. He didn't regret killing his father, but anyways, he had been living and barely surviving on the streets. The blue-haired boy somehow wandered into the less favorable parts of his district. A part of him wished that someone would end his life. No one cared about him. A random kid on the streets covered in dirt. Not even heroes. Why hadn't the heroes rescued him? Why were the heroes neglecting him? Why did no one care? Why did that old lady who approached him earlier just leave him? Was it the punishment of doing what he did? Was it because he looked like a bad person? He was a bad person. He doubted he looked well with or without dirt and soot. After all, he had not been eating well. A growl from his stomach reminded him about the fact more. Although he wanted to go find something to eat, maybe from the dumpsters near the restaurant he saw this afternoon, Tenko knew that walking alone at night was not wise. Maybe should he just do it regardless of the danger? He edged towards the entrance of the narrow alley he had been occupying, but stumbled back soon after as a huge shadow crossed over his little form. Two scary men with scary faces loomed over him. "What's this? A child? What is a brat like you doing here at night?" snarled the one with a beanie. The other one wearing a jacket stepped closer to him. The foul smell that Tenko knew was of liquor made him almost throw up. "And none of your business." "Huh, what was that? Speak up, imp, or else we might play around with you a little before." The man paused, his hand coming to rest on Tenko's shoulder. "We escort you to somewhere better." He didn't know if it was a good move or not, but he just had to reply. This time louder, "I said none of your business. Go away." The two men laughed at him. The beanie guy also closed in on him and cooed in the detestable voice Tenko had ever had. "Itty bitty baby, are you throwing a tantrum? If so, let us comfort you, huh?" The next thing the child knew, he was on the ground, arms around his head, being beaten and kicked by those worthless human beings. Why him? Why wasn't the hero coming? It hurt, and seconds felt like hours under agony. He clenched his fists so tight that pain seeped into his palms. "Huh, you think you can talk back like that? How about now, you fucking brat? Boss will be pleased with us when we deliver you after finishing up here." A voice taunted him. Tenko couldn't realize whose, but he hated it. A cackle. "Right, man. Bet he'll fetch us a decent amount. Look at him, maybe 5 or 6 years old. His quirk must have come in already, right? Right, his quirk. After all, he could just touch them with his hands, just like he did back then. Maybe this would finally end." Tenko extended a hand to catch the foot coming towards him, but another one from the other side knocked him really hard, making him abandon his plan. The world was slowly becoming dizzy. His hand fell uselessly to the floor as he uselessly lay on the ground without even being able to save himself. Maybe it was him after all. He must be unsavable, both by the heroes and himself. His breath sped up, worsening the pain in his chest. But then, no more kick came. Had those thugs stopped? He opened his red eyes, which he didn't know was closed in the first place. Figures appeared in his clouded vision. He could make out 3 faint silhouettes, 2 swiftly retreating but 1 staying. "Are you all right? It's okay now. I am here." Tenko only saw a blurry face of a masked man. He was dressed in black or any other dark color really, as all he saw was blurs and general colors. Who was he? Was he another thug? Was he another villain? A small part of the blue-haired child whispered the possibility of the man being a hero, but he shut it up with a mental shush. He was not someone who could be saved. Gentle hands supported him into a sitting position. "Here, drink some water. It'll help." Tenko just didn't refuse, even though it could be poison for all he knew. His dizziness felt better after some water. He must have been really thirsty. Blinking, he looked at the form crouching in front of him. His vision cleared and he was met with a pair of kind but also intense green eyes. Who are you?" The stranger gave him a small smile. "I'm Zeal, an underground hero. I'll take you to safety after I've given you some first aid." How dare those thugs beat a child? The last part was muttered, but the 6-year-old heard some of it. Then, what the hero was implying caught up with him. Did safety mean being imprisoned for Kai for what he had done? Tenko really didn't want to go to prison. It was where all the bad villains went to. Did that mean he was a villain too? After all, good people didn't do what he did. Unknown to himself, the child's breathing picked up, making the hero try to comfort him more. However, how good were words when one couldn't hear them? He brought his knees up to his chest. His neck suddenly felt really itchy, and so his hands went to scratch, but a big gloved hand entered his vision to stop him. His hands should never be touched. Tenko couldn't help but flinched and curled up further into a ball. He made out a voice telling him to breathe. He didn't even know he had stopped breathing. He gasped and gulped a large amount of air in, but he still felt suffocated. He looked up and saw the man gesturing overly to inhale and exhale. Would it feel better if he copied him? It did feel better. He was feeling better and thinking clearer, so he tried to run from this underground hero. He didn't want to go to jail. It would be scary too. But his legs gave out, or maybe it was the hero's quirk. Tenko didn't see what happened while he was fighting the thugs. It was kind of blurry with smoke or something. Patience. You should not move much. Also, good job there, young man. You were great holding out against those two. The softness of the man's voice made him all nauseous and warm inside at the same time. Just what kind of hero was he? The man continued talking in a low but strangely comforting tone. "May I see your injuries? Or would you rather be treated at a hospital? We will have to have you checked up, of course, when we are at the nearest police station." Police station. The hero took off his mask, revealing a freckled face behind it. No, you are in any trouble. Who would say the truth to someone who was really in trouble while having to catch that someone? Tenko could not trust this man, however reassuring he might seem to be. Therefore, he said in a small voice, "Can you treat them? I don't want to waste other people's time. And also, don't touch my hands." He would see whether or not the man was really trying to save him that way. If he treated his injuries without tricking him, that would mean that this man was a nice person, right? Okay then, kiddo. He took out a case from his belt and Tenko didn't know how he felt about the fact that Zeal took care of the grazes and bruises with a gentleness he hadn't felt since that happened. His stomach rumbled, making his pale face flushed with embarrassment. Then, the older man offered, "I think I have something that can fix that. We can't have our tummies growling now, can we?" After handing him a packet of mini milk buns. The hero extended his hand before letting out an "oh" and taking his hand back. "Do you think you are ready to go to the station, young man? After all, you should not be out at this time of the night." Tenko didn't know if he should trust this hero. He was kind to him though. That must mean he wasn't going to trick him. Gulping, he came to a decision after a few seconds of worrying his lower lip in thought. The blue-haired child nodded and the hero gave him another smile. Only this time it seemed to be a relieved one. "That's nice. Now, may I carry why?" Then, the ground beneath him vanished and he fell into what seemed like a hole. And the last thing he saw was a green light trying to reach him but being consumed by the darkness. He suddenly plopped onto something solid. Blinking, he looked around and saw an old man in a white coat and a younger man behind him. What had happened? Where was he? Thank goodness that annoying hero didn't get the kid first. "Your service is not needed anymore, Seichai. Leave." The bald man was addressing the other, who left them alone quickly as if afraid of him. Was he just kidnapped? Were these men villains? Then, the old man crouched down and said, "Good, good. You are at least in one piece. Follow me, boy." His breath stank. If the man in front of him was in fact a villain, it would not be wise to disobey his order. And there was a feeling that the man was not a normal villain but so much more than that. Tenko swallowed and clenched the snack the nice underground hero had given him before going after the doctor. Well, he thought the old man was a doctor as he was wearing the white coat. They passed several big glass tubes containing green liquid, and who knew what else on their way out of the room. The child frowned, afraid. He was unsavable after all. These villains easily snatched him right under the hero's nose. The unoccupied hand scratched his neck, irritated with this feeling of being weak and useless. His short legs walking fast to catch up to the doctor. Maybe he should use his quirk on the man in front of him. But that would be a bad move. Not only did he not know where they are, but also there had to be other people here. Then, the man left him in a surprisingly nice but dimly lit room saying, "Master would be pleased. Behave yourself and don't cause trouble. He'll meet you when he returns," before muttering under his breath, "Stupid kid. I swear I'll never understand what he wants with this little shit." The door closed and Tenko stood in the room alone. God fucking damn it. Izuku felt like Detroit smashing himself. He finally found him and he let him slip away like a fucking useless idiot. No, control yourself and start thinking rationally, Midoriya. Breathing deeply, he crouched down at the spot Tenko had once been and inspected the ground. He did not recognize that teleportation quirk. It was neither like Kurogiri's nor the one that tiny Namu used. The ground had just opened up and swallowed the child in whole. Perhaps it was the work of those two thugs from before. Did he just let two child trafficking villains go? He hurriedly pulled out his phone and opened the tracking app that Nezu installed. Thankfully, he attached the tracking device to Tenko while tending to his injuries. He swore the principal just knew this situation would happen. Wasn't that a scary thought? Did the creature use high specs to predict this? No, he had to focus. The red dot which signaled the child's location was near the outskirts of this distinct, in a forest or some kind of deserted area from the looks of it. So, he climbed onto the roof using Black Whip and jumped with 75% one for all. There was no one to notice a flying man at night. Even if there were, Izuku doubted he would be seen as he was using another quirk, the one which produced smoke, to cover himself up and blend in with the dark sky. However, frankly, the freckled man could care less about appearances or discretion. The only thing he cared about was Tenko, the child who he failed to save again in this world. He would be damned if his foolish actions led to Tenko being presented to that despicable villain like a gift by two no-name villains. He was finally here. Right now, the hero was floating near the ceiling of the building where the device said Tenko was in. The dark green of his suit and Fifth's quirk were making a good job in camouflage, combined with the fact that the ceiling was high and the security cameras were mostly directed to the ground. He stayed unnoticed. He even passed a thug or two, but they didn't see him as the hallway was dimly lit. This was going too smooth. Was this a hideout of some Yakuzas? The downside of being a hero in a different world was that Izuku was less familiar with crime patterns here. He made a mental note to study them after he took Tenko back. Meeting with the boy in an alley and getting to talk with him even for a short period had been great. It helped the boy realize that he was not someone who would hurt him. It also helped Izuku differentiate this world's Tenko from his own world's Shigaraki. Who he was about to save was a hurt child, suffering because fate decided to deal him a cruel hand. Not the monster who wreaked havoc and destruction under All for One's guidance. Not the monster who took down his comrades and murdered many innocent people. Here, Tenko was but a mere child, and the freckled man intended to keep it that way. There was no guarantee that All for One would not find another successor. But Nezu was willing to risk the possibility of the unknown outcome by saving the little Shimura. Izuku was just grateful that he got a chance to save Nana's grandchild. Cutting his train of thought, he stilled as two guards turned the corner. Heard the mad doctor summoned you. You all right? The other man let out a nervous laugh. Yeah, bro, he just wanted me to do an errand for him. I'm just glad I didn't have to see him. I heard he comes here sometimes. Interesting. From what they were saying, their leader did not reside here. And the second man seemed to be afraid of their boss. Fear was a common ruler among the criminal groups, so Izuku was not really that surprised. But the mention of a doctor troubled him. The two criminals turned to another corridor and the hero resumed his journey towards where Tenko was kept. Then, suddenly he stopped. Danger sense was nagging him to check the room at the end of the hallway. The tracking device indicated that he was actually just a right turn away from the child he was supposed to save. However, with Fourth's quirk warning him, Izuku decided to take a look, and he wished he didn't. The sight before him triggered many unpleasant memories, for the room he entered was filled with glass tubs and containers of all kinds and sizes. Izuku stood in the middle of the room. No wonder danger sense was going off like a shrill siren. Just why didn't he choose a better plan than marching straight into All for One's tough? Although he knew this was a possibility, he couldn't face the powerful villain alone, in a foreign domain, without any backup or anyone knowing that he was fighting All for One. This was All for One at his peak before the fight that turned half his face into a rubber stud. Nezu wouldn't be happy if he just vanished without a trace, would he? And it was this world's All Might who should trump over the century-old villain. This was not his fight, not his duty. However, saving Tenko was. He couldn't very well back out now because backing out meant letting All for One have Tenko. Moreover, this building was not the main hideout. Otherwise, it wouldn't be this easy to break in. The freckled man knew it wouldn't be pretty if All for One was in this building. He opened the messaging app in his phone to quickly type out a short but precise message to Nezu along with his location and an instruction to send backup if he didn't contact the creature within 45 minutes. After sending the message, he cautiously walked down the rows of water tanks containing what Izuku knew to be prototypes of the Nomus and some other parts of human corpse, although he should be rushing to Tenko and leave this place immediately. His stomach churned at the sight, but he came to a stop when he saw a glimpse of white between the rows of glass tubes. For a moment, he feared that it was All for One's doctor, but further observation told him that it was simply a bedsheet covering a body. Approaching the surgical table set up like a hospital bed, he took a look at the one who was lying on it. It was a young man, maybe even a teenager. Purple and black wisps of mist covered the left side of his pale face. His short hair was a similar color. It seemed like a buzzcut grown longer. Various drips and machines had been attached to his body. The hero moved the white sheet lower to discover that the entire left side of his body was covered in mist. Both surgical and normal scars decorated the visible skin. Thankfully, the unconscious teenager was still breathing. Izuku knew this person. A familiar mist-covered face flashed before him. He never thought he would meet Kurogiri here, or should he say Shirakumo. In front of him was another victim of the mad schemes of Dr. Yujiko, and behind him was a sharp projectile speeding towards his head. The pro-hero sidestepped to the right. The red dagger-like object embedded itself into the concrete casing in front of him. Nice dodge, hero. Unauthorized entry detected in Lab Beta. Kyudai, or Daruma according to his latest alias, raised an eyebrow as he heard the announcement from one of his computers. Naturally, he opened the CCTV footage of said laboratory to see a sneaky little thief sniffing around his creation. Zooming in, he used a feature recognition system to fish out info on this hero. None of his master's followers dared enter his labs without his permission, and then, the doctor promptly recognized this man as the hero who almost took the Shimura boy. Master would be here after he had finished his business with some of his inner cycle to meet the little brat. He had been pleased that the doctor prevented Shimura from being saved. The brat being saved by some measly hero would have hindered his plans. The records he pulled up only included basic information such as hero name, quirk, and date of employment, even though the site he had hacked into was more detailed than what was available to the public. Underground heroics were a secretive thing. Just how did this rookie underground hero enter their building? First, zeal almost messed up Master's plans, and now he infiltrated his lab. But there was a saying that Kyudai agreed with. Curiosity killed the cat, especially if the cat was weak and alone. The bald man smiled creepily as he ordered 3 of his henchmen with some nice quirks to go after the little hero. They should be enough to get rid of the bug. Even with an energy-type quirk, a new underground hero such as Zeal wouldn't stand a chance against the 3 he sent. Then, the doctor turned back to his research. He was a bit annoyed at the interruption, but oh well. That hero would not be getting out of here alive. It was a shame that such a newbie got disposed of on the 3rd day of his heroic career. Well, at least, this hero had an interesting quirk. He might add it to his collection. 2 men and a woman surrounded him. Izuku turned around to face them, his back turned towards Shirakumo. Green eyes flickered around. taking his surroundings and thinking up ways to effectively capture the three without using his other obviously different quirks. He looks impressive for a newbie, the man with a lion mutation quirk commented from his place at the top of the water tank on his left. The lady with red hair and red nails, both of which appeared to be capable of transforming into the sharp projectiles, drawled, "Let's just finish this one before he comes back. Besides, I have somewhere to go after this." The last man nodded before all three of them attacked him. Izuku created a dome of sorts over the unconscious boy behind him with tendrils of black energy which were coming out of his back. The red projectiles sped towards him, but he just dodged all of them with ease. The only close-ranged fighter pounced on him, but a well-aimed punch with 45% one for all knocked him out. The two seemed surprised at their allies' fall, giving the hero time to shoot out whips to restrain them. The female villain had a hard time using her quirk as the whip was wrapped around her hair and her whole body. Izuku had trained to create stronger and harder whips before he became the number 2 hero, so her sharp projectiles didn't do anything against Black Whip. Then, his body was speeding towards the ceiling, leaving a crater when he collided with it. Experience prevented him from releasing the whips in surprise. "Oi, Doc doesn't like if his things are damaged. Watch it, jerk," the muffled voice of the lady warned the man with a previously unknown quirk. But after seeing it in action for the first time, the black-haired hero suspected that it was an ability to accelerate matter in one direction. Floating, instead of coming down, the hero smirked slightly behind his mouth guard. The acceleration man's palms were facing at him, 2 black arrows on it. Also, what the woman said earlier gave him an idea. As a hero, it was drilled into his fighting style to limit the property damage to a minimum. But he didn't have to worry about it while fighting in the enemy's land. "I'm sorry, but my job is to save these civilians." Without even giving the last villain a chance to blink, Izuku was on him along with a 45% smash. He felt a bit bad as the poor man went through the water tank behind him, showering him with water and glass. A motionless and disfigured body of the prototype Namu plopped beside the unconscious villain. The fight was anticlimactic, to be honest. But well, the power difference was just so massive even though he was using only 3 quirks. He deactivated the dome of whips for Shirakumo and calmly walked towards the lady who was the only conscious criminal. A calculated strike to her neck knocked her out. He didn't want to use violence unnecessarily. Now he had to get out of here now. Who knew when All for One was going to show up? After figuring out which wire or pipe was which for a solid minute and deeming them not essential to keeping the boy alive, the freckled man chose to detach all of them from the Shirakumo boy. Thankfully, the boy was still breathing when the hero carried him on his back, with a whip to leave his hands free. Then, he also drugged the 3 villains out of the room. Izuku checked the time. He still had 30 minutes left until the promised time. Standing at the entrance of the lab with 3 unconscious villains behind him, he blasted a 75% air flick at the Namu tanks gleefully. Call him petty, but that was for what they did to Kurogiri, who after regaining his memories as Shirakumo, had been a great help against battling All for One's force, and all the other people that crazy doctor experimented on. Alarms started blaring as he sprinted towards where Tenko was, carefully carrying Shirakumo on his back. The teen was in a curled-up position, cocooned by some whips so he could move comfortably. Shouts echoed through the hallways, but so far, Danger Sense hadn't notified him of any approaching obstacles. Maybe Izuku should not have destroyed the lab in a brief moment of anger as he suspected it was what triggered the alarms. Izuku conjured twin thick vertical blankets of smoke which covered both ends of the corridor they were in. That should buy him some time. He knocked off the door handle of the room and then he opened it. "Kid, Tenko." The boy was standing as far as possible from the door, wide red eyes staring at him with surprise and a tint of fear which morphed into recognition. Izuku didn't turn off the full cowling as the green and magenta lines on his body were lighting the dark room. "You came," whispered the blue-haired child as if he didn't believe his eyes, clenching the packet of snack Izuku had given him earlier with his pinkies raised. Izuku smiled before he crouched down. "Yes, kiddo. It's okay now. I am here. Come with me. I'll get you out of this place." The boy hesitated, looking down at his hands. "But I can't touch you. You would become like my family." The freckled hero already knew this was going to be an issue, so he had already taken a roll of bandage from his belt. Smiling, he said in a soft yet firm voice, "Just give your hands to me. I know a way to stop your quirk from activating. Come on, kiddo. We need to hurry a bit." They definitely had to hurry because All for One could arrive here any time. The older man just hoped that the child had not met the villain, which was likely. Pale and dirty hands dropped the packet of milk buns and shakily came into Izuku's own big and scarred ones. He covered the pinkies with the bandage. The boy hesitantly tested by touching the wall behind him as he said that he didn't want to let Izuku carry him without testing. When it didn't crumble away, he immediately latched onto Izuku. The hero wrapped a whip around the child. Poor Tenko was trembling. He couldn't blame him. The boy had a rough time. A gloved hand gently hugged him. Loud voices came from just beyond the wall. Izuku was about to punch away the wall in front of him when his chest and head felt like they were about to burst. Sheer pressure spiked, and the green-eyed man immediately recognized the feeling. It was one that he knew too well, the one which danger sense used to give him in All for One's presence, this suffocating feeling. And he knew he had to move. Were he alone, he would have think twice before retreating, but with two others to rescue, he couldn't risk anything because one wrong slip meant failure. And he was sick of failures. In a blink, all of them were outside, in the sky, quite far from their former location. The familiar strain of 100% one for all crawled up along his legs. A hand was supporting Tenko and the other Shirakumo. Izuku couldn't let his guard down yet. So far no danger had been detected, and it didn't seem like they were being chased. However, knowing his luck, he didn't dare believe fate was on his side. After all, he went into the building, thinking that he was going to save a child from a bunch of child traffickers. Instead, he ended up rescuing a human experimentation victim, destroying one of the mad doctor's labs, stealing the aforementioned child under All for One's nose, and hastily retreating. Whatever deity above should really give him a break, even if they had something against him. After about 10 seconds of flying, Izuku landed on a rooftop. They were safely back downtown. A sigh slipped out of him after making sure that there weren't any pursuers. Then he looked down at the bundle in his chest. Tenko was hiding his face in the hero's chest. The trembles had subsided, but he was holding tightly onto him. "Hey, buddy, look, we made it." Teary red eyes looked up at him before watching the city lights. The blue-haired child hugged Izuku again, and for some reason, the action warmed Izuku's heart more than it should have. He whimpered, "You came. You really came." "Of course I came. Now, why don't we go check out for injuries at a hospital?" "Hold on, we're jumping again. Shirakumo should be taken to the hospital immediately." The older man didn't know the extent of Dr. Yujiko's experiment or the condition of the unconscious teen. When they arrived at the nearest general hospital, Shirakumo was immediately transferred into the emergency wards due to his condition. But the dusty child refused to let go of the hero. It was okay at first, as there weren't any major injuries aside from bruises. However, Izuku had to report to the police about what happened as a hero of this world. He had already given Nezu a summary of what happened. In fact, the principal was coming to the hospital at the very moment. The man couldn't really believe all of that went down in less than 20 minutes after he stumbled upon the Namu lab. So they just had to persuade Tenko to let him go. Whenever anyone tried to pry him away from the underground hero, the child held on even tighter. Even without any black whip to support him, the small child was hanging on to Izuku with both hands and legs, which made the freckled man feel like he was being hugged by a koala. He lowered his mask to let the child see his smile. "Kid, I have to go. I can't very well take you with me now, can I?" the older man softly said to the kid on his lap. Tenko didn't say anything. The only sound he made had been growls and whimpers whenever someone tried to take him away from the underground hero. This was the first time in his hero career that a kid got so strongly attached to him. Sure, some kids had been reluctant to let the number 2 hero, Deku, go, but not to this extent. Finally, the hospital staff had to sedate him. Izuku didn't want to resort to such measures, but he had to allow the 6-year-old to be taken. Duty called, and as a hero, he couldn't ignore it. Zeal had just finished recounting the events of the night to the police officer assigned to his case when Nezu arrived at the hospital. "Akatani-kun, here you are. How are you?" Even though it was almost midnight, the principal was dressed in his usual business attire and smiling his usual smile. The black-haired man nodded. "I'm fine, sir, although I'll have to drop in at the police station to file paperwork later after I finish my patrol." He received a nod from the creature. "How about we talk in my car before you resume your patrol?" As soon as they both were in the car, Nezu started talking. "Seeing as we are the only ones here, it'd be safe to talk. Even though you managed to get out of there, I decided to give a tip to the Might Agency and urge them to check out the location you sent." Due to some indecision on their part, the investigation team arrived roughly 35 minutes after your initial message and only found an abandoned building. "Well, our info didn't have that much evidence, so I can't really blame them. However, may I know if All Might was among the ones who went there?" The other responded, "Yes, he was." "Are you implying that?" "I am." Just as I left the building, All for One appeared there. I barely made it out with 2 civilians. Although All Might is already the number 1 hero, I think it's still early for them to clash. Green eyes were gazing straight ahead, hardened. He knew Nezu had been wondering why he knew this much about One for All and All for One, but he doubted that he would tell the creature anytime soon. The furry creature gave a noncommittal noise. "I see. Congratulations on completing the first step of our plans. Also with a bonus, I must say. One Shirakumo Aburo. Yue would be relieved to hear that he was actually alive. His death was the reason why my predecessor had to retire. The young man had much potential too. It was a joint effort. Without your tracker, Tenko wouldn't have been found. Thank you, Nezu. No, thank you, Midoriya. Izuku smiled sheepishly as even at this age, he still didn't accept compliments well before asking, do you know what would happen to Tenko next, sir? The creature hummed before replying. It is still uncertain at the moment. Tomorrow, perhaps it will become more certain. However, it is most likely that without any living family member, the child will be put into either the foster care system or the witness protection system. I'll see what I can do. Letting such a destructive quirk unchecked is not wise. After thanking the principal again and saying goodbyes, the underground hero got out of the car and jumped onto the nearby roof. He still had to resume his patrol. It was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. The only light was coming behind 2 electric lanterns behind Kyudai. The whole room was rather wide, but the only furniture in it was a well-polished wooden table with a matching chair. The bald man stood motionless behind his master, who was sitting in his throne-like chair. All of his followers who had been in the hideout they just had to abandon were on their knees. They were merely small-time criminals assigned to watch over the place. The building itself was in the middle of nowhere, and no one had ever discovered its location. That was until this rookie underground here with an annoying energy quirk got in and messed everything up. A part of his mind knew that this mess was partially his fault. If only he tied up the loose ends after taking the Shimura brat and made sure Zeal bite the dust, this wouldn't be happening. Master would still have the boy, and Kyudai wouldn't have lost some of his creations. The hero not only took Shimura but also his warp gate candidate. It was rare to come across such unique quirks. He only had to figure out which quirks would create a warping quirk when combined. And now, that blasted hero stole the base for his project. It could be worse. He could have lost his research data stored in the lab beta. He didn't want to think about what would happen if the data got stolen. The air in the room turned thicker with tension. The doctor knew his master was more than a little dissatisfied. Tell me, how did you fail to notice a hero in your own hideout? You go first, Itaki. Aren't you the one who was monitoring the security cameras? A deep and rich voice of Master asked. The man in question bowed, his forehead touching the cool cement floor. Forgive me, Master. I didn't. He could not finish his question before 3 dark spikes with slivers of red stabbed him through his head and back. All for One retracted them after a moment. The lifeless corpse sagged onto the floor more, still in the bowing position. Blood was rapidly pooling around it. The criminals in front of him stiffened in fear. I thought it was rather inevitable that the security camera guard or some of them got killed. However, as the powerful villain Lord's doctor and lead researcher, he knew he himself would be spared. But of course, he won't be coming out of this unpunished. You all failed me. I am disappointed in all of you, my followers. Pleas and promises to be better next time rung out. I doubted they would get out of this with just a slap on the wrist. After all, they weren't in Master's inner circle, and even the inner circle did not get out of this kind of mistake without being punished. Words mean less and your actions more. Screams replaced their words as All for One used one of his favorite quirks. What it did was making the victim review their greatest fears. A shame it did not work on the ones with strong minds. If it did, those One for All users would not know what hit them. After about 5 minutes of punishing the failures, his master cancelled the quirk and dismissed them all. I watched them hurrying out of the room like a horde of headless chickens. I want to know more about this underground hero. Zeal, you said his name is? Order our man in the Hero Commission to look into him. The doctor made a mental note about that. And have you gathered what happened during the fight with those 3 you sent to the lab beta? If so, give me a detailed recount and what you have known so far about his quirk. I obeyed obviously. After his explanation was finished, his master hummed thoughtfully. Black whip-like tendrils, you say? Did dear Banjo have some relatives all this time without my knowledge? That man didn't seem like the type to have a family. Even if Seal is related to him, he'd be his great-grandchild or something. After all, the young hero must be around 22 years old or so, yes. The heroic training for high school graduates had a duration of 4 years, so as a newbie, Zeal must be 22 at the youngest and 26 at the oldest. Yes, Master. He is a rookie, so he must be around that age. But it seems there is another aspect of his quirk, sir. I have been informed that he has more than average speed and strength. It is almost like Kyudai trailed off, reluctant to finish that thought. Almost like he has more than one quirk. All for One finished it in his stead. Well, I'm sure we will have a chance to experiment with him. The powerful villain was wearing his signature smirk, the one that never failed to remind the doctor of the times his master achieved anything and everything he wanted. The man had such a powerful and thrilling aura to him that his younger self immediately swore to follow him as soon as they met. And he never judged him for his ideas, supporting and adding his own to them even. It was a pleasure to work under him. Doctor, you wouldn't mind taking a break from your research for some time, would you? Instead, I'll leave it to you to find another building for yourself and your creations. After all, you failed to protect what's been given to you. It's only fitting that you work to compensate for that. This was his punishment, the bald man thought until All for One continued. Oh, and as for letting the little Shimura get taken, Fear spiked through his chest as flashes of his worst and scariest memories from the depths of his mind passed through his very eyes. When he came around, he was on the ground, the glinting red eyes of his master gazing down at him paired with the emotionless look that never failed to send a chill down Kyuda's spine. You cost me a perfect opportunity. Now the Shimura boy will be ensnared by those heroes and their traps. The figure stood up from his chair. He vanished, but not without a parting sentence. I am disappointed in you, Yujiko. Do better next time, will you? He hadn't heard that one for years. Izuku woke up to his phone ringing. Swiftly blinking out the last of his sleepiness, he grabbed the noisy device from the bedside table. Hello? The freckled man stifled the following yawn as much as he could. Even though he had become an underground hero and his sleep schedule was flipped upside down from what he was used to, it would still be rude to yawn into the phone. Yes, this is Zeal speaking. He almost used his former hero name. It was still 1 hour till noon, and considering that he got back later than usual this early due to some paperwork at the police station, he had only slept for 5 hours. But tiredness vanished from Izuku when the caller told him that he was the officer in charge of yesterday's case. Heroes couldn't afford to be tired when duty called. He had learnt that before his high school graduation. The caller informed that they had attempted to ask Tenko what happened since he went missing, but the boy didn't even utter a word. Therefore, they were asking the hero's assistance in interviewing the child. The officer explained that Izuku being there might encourage the little Shimura to open up. Of course, I understand. No, it's not a bother. I'd like to help. Though, there is a chance that the blue-haired boy would not open up to Izuku. After all, what happened to his family was quite a traumatic event for a child as young as him. They agreed to meet at the hospital 2 hours later. Izuku set his alarm and tried to get 1 more hour of shut-eye. When he woke up again, it was already noon. After taking care of his personal hygiene, the black-haired man went into the kitchen to prepare a meal for himself. The quarters Nezu had given him consisted of 3 rooms. The living room was linked with the kitchen. The other 2 were a bedroom and a bathroom. It was small, but he was just glad that he had a place to stay. It could be worse without Nezu's help. Putting together a healthy but light meal, the man mused. If he used his quirk, then going to the hospital would not take a long time, only a couple of minutes. An hour was more than enough for him to get ready. He hadn't cleaned his hero costume, so he would have to check if it was in less than presentable shape. Going with his hero attire would make Tenko more comfortable, as he would recognize him as the one who rescued him. And he didn't really want to give anything that might link his civilian identity to that of Seal. After all for One was bound to take an interest in him after the stunt he pulled. Not to mention the villain was probably curious about his quirk. Izuku really had a close call, didn't he? There had been a lot of things that could go wrong, but it all went right for some reason. He came out with the most preferable outcome. The worst would be coming face to face with All for One. Although Izuku knew that All for One would be stronger than he was in Izuku's original world, he was confident that if he were to fight with the despicable villain, he would be the victor. The victor, yes, but not without a scratch. From what he saw from his visit to the doctor's lab, the Nomus didn't look like the ones from his first year of high school. He doubted they were even functional. It would be safe to assume that Dr. Yujiko hadn't figured out a way to give more than one quirk to the mutated messes. And that meant All for One wouldn't have Nomus on his side when they clashed. He put the dishes into the sink to wash later when he came back and headed to don his hero costume, which thankfully looked presentable after dusting it once or twice. It would be noticeable against the blue and white sky, but well, it was designed to blend into the dark. And he was going to be traveling at high speed, so he hoped that he wouldn't alarm anybody. Officer Sawamura, I'm sorry for making you wait. It seemed Izuku was the last to arrive. Although he was not late, it would be polite to apologize. His hero costume attracted many stares even though he landed on the hospital rooftop. It must have been a sight. A black-haired man in mostly black clothing with a black mask and combat gear in a brightly lit hospital. Izuku was just grateful that no one had approached him, wanting his autograph or something. But then again, he would have his status as a newbie and underground hero to thank for that. It's perfectly fine, Zeal. Oh, this is Detective Tanuma. The police officer gestured to the new man beside him. Izuku gave a nod to the man. Sir, this is the underground hero who saved the boys. The detective offered him his hand, so Izuku clasped it with his gloved one in a short but firm handshake. Name's Tanuma Izo. I'll be working on this case. Nice to meet Cha. Congrats on a successful rescue even though you have just recently received your license. The pleasure is all mine, Detective. My hero name is Seal. Izuku asked after the introduction. How may I be of assistance, Detective? Oh, Officer Sawamura and I actually met the lad this morning just before you were contacted. The boy didn't say a word as to how he got onto the streets, and the events that happened after that. Tanuma shook his head. Understandable, as it must have been traumatic for a young child. So, we hope you could somehow help us with this situation. The officer continued. The older boy you saved from the villains is still unconscious but thankfully in a stable condition. We have no choice but to interrogate the poor child. Ah, speaking of the other teen, would you mind informing us if anything concerning him came up, such as his name or anything you saw that might give us a clue as to who he is? Izuku nodded. He did not tell who Tenko and Shirakumo were, as a normal underground rookie could not possibly know the names of the two civilians he came across one night. Otherwise, he would just give the officers their names, the whole story of what happened to the Shimuras, and the fact that the unconscious teen was the UA student who was killed during an internship. Of course, sirs, I will see what I can do. Is it okay if I go in there alone? The freckled man did not want to put any kind of pressure on Tenko. It would definitely be upsetting for the boy to have to recount what had happened to him. At least, the man hoped that talking about his past would be easier if he thought they were alone. What Tenko went through was something that haunted him all the way to his adulthood, something that affected him very strongly, that he was influenced by it, something that all for one used to manipulate him into a villain in Izuku's world. The others easily agreed to what the underground hero proposed, and all of them got into the elevator. When they arrived, it was the masked pro who knocked on the door of the hospital room. When a tiny hoarse voice called out "Come in," he opened the door. Then, Shigaraki was there leaning against the pillow on the bed. Half of his face bandaged up heavily, but his red eye was trained on Izuku while aiming his usual deranged smile at the hero. He blinked. This was not a good time to be reminded of Tenko's alternate older self, though he could see why he got this particular flashback. Deku himself went to meet the villain at the hospital after he had been apprehended. All for one didn't come out of their final clash with his life intact, which Izuku was glad for, as the man took away someone very precious to him, but Shigaraki was spared. Izuku wanted to talk with him. He needed to talk with him. They needed to talk with him. But the person in front of him right now was just a child, a 6-year-old who lost his family to a freak quirk accident and was kidnapped after having to survive almost a week on the streets by himself. A boy who was now staring at him with wide red eyes as the hero took off his mask to give him a smile. Izuku walked toward the bed and sat down in the chair on its side. "Good afternoon. I see you're awake." But silence followed his words as the child just continued his staring. His face was awfully impressive, to the point of being completely blank. The cut across his lips had been treated. However, there was still a scar left. A thin bandage covered the scratches on his neck, which Izuku knew to be self-inflicted. The younger one looked so vulnerable in his small hospital gown, its color matching his light blue hair. He looked so washed out, leaning against the pillow. "You're," Tenko finally said before clearing his throat. "You're that hero, right?" "Yes, I am the one who found you, kiddo. Zeal is my codename. But I'm sure a sharp kid like you remember that, right?" The freckled man kept his voice soft and his body language non-threatening as possible. He received a hesitant nod, so he continued, "I'm glad you are all right." The boy fell silent again, but then tears seeped into his eyes, making Izuku alarmed. "Hey, it's okay. Everything will be all right. You're safe now." He slowly offered a hand to the child, but Tenko neither made no move to let Izuku comfort him nor inched away from him, just staying there unmoving and staring at the hero with tearful red eyes. "So I am not unsavable." He may have seen and done a lot of things on the journey of defeating Shigaraki, but this somehow made him feel like he had been carrying 1,000 pounds of lead on his shoulder. Somehow this was not just a child asking if he was savable or not. This suddenly became more personal than it should be while interacting with a young civilian he had saved. But saving Tenko had always been personal, hadn't it? His chest ached. "No, you are not unsavable. No one is unsavable." Well, maybe a certain multi-quirked villain overlord was the exception. He knew that he was overselling, but oh well. "Why would you think so? I am here. You are here, aren't you? In a hospital. You're not there anymore, kid. You're safe, saved." Had Shigaraki been like Tenko when he was his age? He must have been, right? They were arguably the same people but from different worlds. But also they were different people at the same time. Small hands, which were still in the gloves Izuku gave him, came up to scratch his neck, but thankfully the bandages prevented further injury. Izuku settled his hand on the edge of the bed and moved closer to the bed. Do you want a hug, buddy?" He knew he sounded dumb and awkward, but it would not be best to physically touch him without his permission, and he felt like Tenko just needed encouragement. After all, the little boy certainly did not want to let go of him last night. The man's assumption was proven wrong when he shook his head no. The 27-year-old pro had never felt more awkward and embarrassed. His internal mutter of chewing himself out had just started when the blue-haired boy gave him a nod again. Izuku supposed he was not the only one who was being indecisive. "Then I'm going to give you a hug, okay?" Tenko wordlessly nodded again before he was engulfed in the hero's arms. Soon enough those pale arms were clinging to him in a way that reminded the black-haired man of the first time he saw Eri. The child somehow settled himself on Izuku's lap, but he did not mind. He did not mind because he could tell the little one definitely needed a hug. Also, he felt bad for just leaving him last night. It was strange to hug the younger alternate version of his enemy though. But the boy in his arms was not really his enemy, was he? He was someone Izuku saved from being kidnapped and brainwashed by All for One. although the black-haired man knew he was not really saving Shigaraki. He couldn't help but feel relief that this Tenko did not have to go through what his older villain counterpart did. The infamous Midoriya tear ducts were starting to activate, but the freckled man was quick to blink the offending tears away. I thought no one would come. The hero blinked again at the sound of Tenko's muffled voice, which was almost too quiet to hear. He relaxed his arms so that the child could get out of the embrace. But the blue-haired boy was still burying his face into Izuku's chest. But then you showed up, the boy sniffled. I'm glad that I could help you, buddy. May I know your name? Izuku asked as if he didn't know. The boy actually looked up instantly, still on the hero's lap with his legs dangling on one side. Why do you want to know my name? It was not unexpected, but a part of him got upset that a young child such as Tenko had to be wary of an innocent question. However, the pro understood why he would be. From their first encounter, the younger one appeared to think that he was going to get into trouble for his quirk getting out of control and was reluctant to go to the police station. I will be honest with you because you have a right to know. Worry seeped into the boy's eyes and his face morphed into a mask, so Izuku quickly reassured him, it is nothing bad. I swear you won't be thrown into jail, get into trouble or something like that. We just want to help you. But to help you, his green eyes bore into the red ones. We need to know your name first and why you were on the street so late at night. Even before discovering the child, Nezu himself gave the green-eyed man his word that he would not let Tenko taken away to a rehabilitation center for powerful quirks. Yeah, rehabilitation center, as if it was not just a glorified prison and training camp. It was on the list of things Izuku should tell Nezu, if he still wanted to change this world before he found a way to go back. Or before he died here, really. After Izuku had become the top 2 hero in his original world, he tried to change that policy of the HPSC, and he actually managed to do so after a year. Some villains had even been from those blasted places because the children and teenagers unfortunate enough to be sent there were treated as criminals. Sure, they broke the law and used their quirks illegally, accidentally in most cases, to warrant some kind of punishment, but they were underaged. They should have been sent to a facility that would help with their quirks and rehabilitate them in non-violent manners, not a prison in all but name. But that was a topic for another day, of course. The freckled pro had a child to comfort and give his attention to. But it's my fault, whispered the boy, looking away. His face was once again too blank for Izuku's liking, but the man noticed his breathing was picking up its rate. I'm sure you did not mean to do whatever you did. How would you know that? You don't even know my name. You don't know what I did to my family either. Tenko spat out. The child slipped onto his bed again, putting distance between the two. Izuku grimaced internally. He knew what exactly happened, and that was why he was feeling awful for questioning the poor boy. He sighed soundlessly. I told you that I would save you, and I did, didn't I? The older man said in a calm voice. The boy's expression softened a bit at those words as he gave the hero a curt nod. And now, I am giving you my word that nothing bad will happen to you, and we only want to help you. Izuku held the boy's gaze and gave him a small smile with a tinge of sadness in it. So will you trust me to keep my word again this time? Tenko was as still as a scared puppy. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out of it. The man waited patiently. He understood that the younger boy would have trust issues as soon as he saw him in that alleyway, reluctant to let the hero save him. The little Shimura choked out, his hands outrightly scratching his neck and dislodging the bandage before his blank facade broke and he started tearing up once again. But only this time, the tears made their way down his face. You really mean it? Yes, buddy, I really mean it. But if you're not ready to talk, I can wait. Your well-being comes first, okay? Izuku felt like he was about to join Tenko and cry along. He would have if he were still the same as that first-year hero course student. But he wasn't. He had gone through much more since then. So the man just kept smiling calmly at Tenko to comfort the younger boy. The well-being of a civilian always came first, both physical and mental. After a few moments of Izuku reassuring and rubbing his back as he cried, the blue-haired boy rubbed away his tears. My name is Tenko, Shimura Tenko, he started, and Ikai made them die. My family. Even though the underground hero already knew what happened, it was not easier to hear it from Tenko himself. In fact, he even suspected that it made it difficult. However, his instincts took over and he found himself encouraging and doing whatever he could to comfort the poor child as he shakily recounted the misfortune and horror that he had gone through. Although he said that he did not think he remembered all of the things that happened, the child started speaking, getting more and more upset as the story turned darker and darker. With a low voice, Tenko told the hero how he was beaten by his father for looking at his grandmother's photo without the man's permission, how his quirk activated on his dog. At this point, the boy was crying, unable to keep his emotions at bay, while Izuku just rubbed his back and kept supplying him with tissues and kind words. He hated to be the one who forced and encouraged the boy to recount this tragic event. Then, the little Shimura told him how scared and panicked he was, and how he accidentally caused the demise of his whole family, although he could not remember all of them dying, including his father who tried to attack the boy with a pole in panic. Izuku did not know what to think of the sliver of satisfaction that flashed through Tenko's eyes while talking about the last person. He would think about it later and probably discuss it with Nezu. But now, he silently offered the boy his hand, and the boy latched onto it with his own gloved one. His hand looked much smaller compared to Izuku's. After taking a break for a few minutes during which the older man made sure that Tenko drank some water, the younger boy started the tale of the days he had to stay on the streets. By the time the child fell silent, Izuku had him on his lap again as Tenko took up his offer for a hug for the second time. "Thank you for telling me, Tenko. I'm proud of you for being so brave." "Well done." The head buried in his clothed chest nodded against him. Izuku was almost worried if the child could even breathe facing his chest. "I am going to help you and things are going to be fine." "Okay, buddy." The freckled man received a nod once again. He doubted the child even got any energy left for answering back. But he was proven wrong again when a small muffled voice uttered a word, "Thanks." Izuku could help but grin a little before sobering up. Tenko made no moves to get out of the hug this time. "There really is no need to thank me, Tenko." The world had been a terrible place for the poor boy. But Izuku was determined to change it. And change it he would. After sitting there for a few minutes, Izuku noticed that Tenko had not moved again. It was only rational to check if something was wrong. And he found that the younger one was fast asleep on his lap, making it a bit difficult for him to move. It had only been around 45 minutes since he started talking with him. It felt like they had been talking much longer than that for Izuku. The visiting hours were supposed to be over in 10 minutes, although the underground hero did not want to leave the boy without saying goodbye. He also did not want to wake him up. The pale boy looked like he needed some rest, and that was why the nurse who came to check Tenko found him all curled up on Izuku as he tried to sit as still as possible, swiftly pulling his mask up to conceal his identity. He offered, "He's fallen asleep. I just did not want to wake him up by moving." The other just gave him a kind smile and said, "Well, you are not allowed past the visiting hours, Mr. Hero, so I'm afraid you can't stay with him forever. Here, let me help you put him back to the bed." "Ah, of course. Thank you." Izuku stared at Tenko as the child slept. He took out something from his belt and after a moment, he left it on the bedside table, addressed to the boy. Greeting the nurse, he exited the room. Officer Sawamura and Detective Tanuma were still there waiting for him. A part of him felt guilty for making them wait for a long time, but it was all worth it in the end. Even if the young boy did not say anything, Izuku was planning to give his name and some other information for the officers to work with. But that brave boy actually trusted Izuku and told him what happened. "Sorry for taking a long time, but the boy told me his whole story. We've got his name. Shimura Tenko," said Izuku as he approached the two. "I think it'd be best if we discuss this at the station or somewhere more private." The officer muttered that he had heard of the Shimura name somewhere. Tanuma nodded. "I'm sorry for making you work while you should be resting, Zeal. There is a nice cafe near the hospital. How about we buy something there before heading to the station?" "My treat." "It's all right, sir. I'm glad to help. And I'm afraid Tenko's case is not a mere case of attempted kidnapping. It'd be safe to assume the same for the other boy." The younger officer asked, "Is there any new info about him?" Izuku hesitated, pondering whether to reveal Shirakumo's name or not. "No, Sawamura. From what I saw, I think the villains did something to the teen. He was on a surgical table with quite a number of wires and tubes attached to his body when I first noticed him. And I doubt that whatever they did was a good thing. Didn't the doctor say that there was something wrong with his quirk factor this morning when we met them?" The detective hummed thoughtfully. Sawamura agreed with the older man. The underground hero quirked his brow. "Something wrong with his quirk factor?" "Yes, his quirk factor," replied the officer. "They said it was almost like he had more than one quirk. Moreover, his body was a mix of human flesh and mist. Therefore, the hospital staff can't use any quirk suppressant drugs as they fear that it might endanger him. I've never heard of this kind of mutation. There is no one who matched his description in our records, so we are currently trying to find someone who matches his DNA, but sadly to no avail." They were closer to uncovering the truth than Izuku expected. Therefore, the next course of action should be to help them. It would not be that suspicious if the freckled man slipped in a theory or two. What if that's what the villains did to him? Experimenting with his quirk. What if that somehow changed his appearance? Different quirk factor must mean a difference in his DNA. He proposed. The two men stopped walking and turned to him. "Not only experimentation but quirk experimentation? Is that what you are saying, Zeal?" questioned the detective. "Yes. Is that even possible? To change one's quirk factor?" Bewilderment was present on Officer Sawamura's face. Oh, it was indeed possible, just not public knowledge. It was possible as long as one quirk-stealing villain was alive. But a rookie underground hero was not supposed to know that. So Izuku just shrugged. "I don't know for sure, but what I saw in that building did not resemble normal human experimentation, if any human experimentation can be called normal." No human experimentation was normal. Izuku grimaced internally at his word choice. Tanuma shared a look with the police officer. We'll keep that in mind. However, it would be best to wait for more test results before deciding on a possibility. But now, let's get to that cafe. Yeah, of course. The city lights cast a glow to the otherwise dark bedroom through the glass wall. A tall and muscular man stood there, gazing down at the site below his apartment. His phone pinged, and he took it out of his pocket to find that there was a message notification. His big hands touched the screen open to read it. It was a message with a file attached to it from Gran Torino. Toshinori wasted no time in reading it. Gran Torino. You might want to take a look at this. A certain white furball sent it to me. He knocked on the door. It was quite unfortunate that he could not reach the doorbell. Maybe he should look into some useful systems to ring the doorbell from his phone. A rather chilling but pleasant evening wind blew past Nezu as he stood in front of Midoriya's door with a takeout bag in his hand. If he calculated right, there was a low chance that the man was planning to have dinner. Of course, Nezu was not spying on the dark-haired man, but he just happened to notice that his neighbor had the lights on even after his patrol, when he normally slept, last night or rather this morning. So here the principal was, coming both to talk to him about the recent events and to have dinner with him together. The door opened to reveal Midoriya in gray sweatpants and a pale green t-shirt, his hair sticking in all directions. Well, more so than usual. Nezu smiled at him pleasantly. Good evening, Midoriya. Mind if we have dinner together this evening? I've got some tonkatsu, steamed rice and miso. Midoriya blinked at him before opening the door wider and inviting him in, his hand waving a form of document as he said, "Oh, come in, principal. Please excuse the mess. I've been sorting out some paperwork and doing a bit of research. I didn't even realize it's already evening." The last part was muttered, but the creature heard it. "Oh, I don't mind. I sometimes get absorbed in work and create messes too. Sir, that sometimes must be quite rare," the other man chuckled. Moments like these reminded Nezu of the fact that the freckled man knew his alternate self to a certain extent. True, his office rarely got as messy as Midoriya's was right now. The coffee table was completely covered with papers and a laptop, so he headed to the kitchen to set the bag down on the table. "You didn't have to bring food too. There is already so much that you've done for me, Nezu. Please take a seat." The dark-haired man continued with a sheepish smile, gesturing towards the sofa as he rushed to arrange the files and sheets of paper and shut the laptop down. But not before the principal caught a glance at the screen, which displayed records of two people, a man and a woman. "Ah, it's okay. I was just passing a restaurant and thought why not?" Nezu replied, even though he did not happen to just buy from the restaurant. The kitchen counter and appliances did not seem to be used recently. "Is it okay if we eat first? You haven't even had lunch, have you, Midoriya?" The man stopped in his tracks before affirming Nezu's suspicion. "Time flies when I'm working. Shall I take out the plates or are these takeout containers fine?" "The containers are fine, thank you." The creature took a seat at the dining table. Strangely, the table was low enough that he can eat comfortably while sitting at it. Wasn't this too low for Midoriya? A comfortable silence fell between them as the other man started setting the table and preparing the meals. He did not fail to notice that Midoriya's scarred hands seemed to shake while opening the rather complex box lid. He must have chronic pain in his crooked fingers. Just how was the man's hero career if he had this many scars in his late 20s? The future was not looking so bright, but hopefully, with Shimura Tenko rescued from All for One, the future of this world would be better. The freckled man noticed him staring at the scars and offered, "Believe it or not, most of them are from my own quirk." "Your quirk, you say?" Now that was an interesting topic to talk about. They both said, "Thank you for the food," before starting their meal. Midoriya took a bite and after a moment, he replied, "Yes, it was too powerful for my body to withstand. So, whenever I used the strength aspect of it, I broke my arms and sometimes fingers at first. But I figured it out after a while, of course." Nezu nodded, chewing. His quirk must be so strong then. To break one's body while in use, it might even be stronger than All Might's. He also wondered how scary it must have been for a human child when their quirk broke their own bones. "You must have broken your arms quite frequently before you could use your quirk safely." The other man shrugged, "Maybe more than 5 times. Neither my teachers nor I could figure out a way around it. But I had a high pain tolerance, so it was not that terrible." The creature's sharp mind focused on certain words such as 5, teachers, and high pain tolerance. He couldn't help but look up. Studies suggest that the pain tolerance level of humans increases with age. Therefore, I doubt you had that high of pain tolerance for broken arms at the age of 4, at most 6. Although Midoriya resumed his movements as if nothing happened, Nezu caught a slight hitch in his breathing. He waited for a response, and after a moment or two, he got one. "Oh, I was 15 at that time. You see, my quirk came in late. But enough of my quirk. Surely you must have another reason for visiting me other than to have dinner with me, sir." The creature recognized the change of topic when he saw one, but he went along with the flow. "Yes, Midoriya, I have some things you should know about the Shimura boy's case. And other news. The rest of the meal was spent talking about other light topics. But after dinner, the two sat down in the living room area with a cup of matcha each. Matcha was one of the high-caffeinated teas, but the principal did not mind. Apparently, neither did Midoriya, even though he had been functioning with no hour of sleep in the last 36 hours and he should sleep. So, about all for one, the freckled man trailed off with a questioning tone. Nezu stirred his steaming tea. With no evidence and only the words of yours and the boys, it is quite difficult to prove that it is connected to All for One. But of course, the higher-ups realize that All for One is definitely involved. Even if we had some evidence, it will still be difficult seeing as the HPSC has sealed All for One's existence as a top secret. Glancing at the other and receiving a nod, he continued, but the investigation for your case, as you might as well know, is still ongoing. I even suspect that the Might Agency has got wind of it. It seems that All Might is keeping track of incidents regarding quirk anomalies. The hero might try to get more information out of you and even the Shimura boy. The creature firmly believed that if Midoriya agreed to work with All Might, taking down All for One would be easier than without the Traveler's assistance. That was the reason why he sent some information about the case and the name of the underground hero, not his civilian one but his hero name, to Gran Torino. Call him manipulative, but it was for the greater good. After all, Midoriya never said anything about not wanting to work with the number one hero, even though it was highly possible he knew All Might personally, given that he was aware of the legacy of One for All. He might even be the successor of the symbol of peace. He got his quirk at 15, did he not? But of course, nothing was certain until the freckled man chose to either confirm or deny his assumption. Nezu observed the man's expression. It was schooled into a professional and neutral one, but he saw a glimpse of something in those green eyes at the mention of All Might. I see. Midoriya put down his cup of tea. Helping All Might defeat All for One is not something I am against. I think you already know that, Nezu. It is just a matter of how much time I will have in this world. Both of them knew there was little possibility of the black-haired man going back to his own dimension. Not that the search for a way to attempt doing so was going to be discontinued. The principal gave him a small smile. Of course, you did say that All for One posed a serious threat for the future if this world was anything like yours, and that you were going to help us take down the villain in exchange for my assistance in looking for a way back to your own world. I do hope that you are not on bad terms with the All Might from your world. Oh, no, definitely not. All Might is a great hero. I don't have any unpleasant history with him. I'd say I am an avid fan of his, actually. The last sentence was accompanied by an upward quirk of his lips. Definitely not was an interesting choice of words. But I will do my best to remain professional even if he comes to see me, which I don't think he will. He is the number one hero and has more important things to do than meet me after all. Nezu did not doubt it. The underground hero seemed to be proficient in compartmentalizing when it came to hero work. Maybe too proficient than he should be. He might have broken down in private, finally letting himself feel the effects of getting thrown into a completely different world and taken from his loved ones, and might have even gotten past that point of grieving. But the principal did not think that was the case. There was something heavy in his eyes and shoulders. However, the creature himself still had many things to learn about the human mind, and he could not guarantee the precision of his ability to read Midori. The man was a complicated individual, more so than normal. He wore his heart on his sleeve, but at the same time, he did not allow others and sometimes even himself to see it. Oh, I'm sure you can manage yourself. I assume you have heard of the Witness Protection Program for Little Shimura. Midoriya nodded. Yes, sir. I was there when the lead officer received the order. It is no surprise that those two will be put into the protection system, seeing as they realized All for One's involvement. We already have a potential couple who are experienced in such cases. Nezu didn't have to convince the HPSC that much to issue that particular order. They were already wary of quirk-related experiments, and the unknown boy the underground hero saved was quite evidence of that type of crime. And the other man knowing the identity of the foster parents for Tenko sort of explained why there were records of a man and a woman to be scrutinized on his laptop. Had Midoriya known the Shimura boy personally in his original world? Was he a relative of his? As the creature had pinned the traveler's younger self to be around 2 years old currently, it was possible that Tenko was a cousin or even a first cousin of his. Out of respect for the man's privacy, he hadn't dug further into his alternate self's life. Normally Nezu wouldn't care for such things while pursuing information, but he felt that he should make an exception for the man. I was doing some background check on the couple myself. We can't afford to let them foster Tenko without confirming they are not connected to All for One or any villains in any way. The creature gave him a nod. It would be foolish of them to save Tenko just to give him back into the claws of that villain. Of course. Also, you are good with kids, Midoriya. The boy agreed to talk to you about his experiences. Yes, sir. You can say that, said the freckled man, rubbing his nape. The furry creature briefly wondered what kinds of events would fall upon the underground hero and the boy he rescued so heroically. It was not every day that there was a mutual connection between a hero and the civilian he saved. But then again, he had a suspicion that saving the blue-haired boy had always been more than a duty to Midoriya. Silence fell as they both sipped from their respective teacups before Nezu started the last of the topics he came to talk about. How about Shirakumo? Has he shown any sign of consciousness? The records say that they still don't know who he really is. Last I heard, he is still unconscious, but the test results are supposed to come in today, although the police haven't contacted me about it. With no way to prove his real identity, we cannot place him with his previous guardians. The green-eyed man paused. I think he will have to be placed into a similar program as Tenko if it turns out that he lost his memories and also after being treated. The principal nodded, his mind mulling over the loss of memories that the other mentioned. I'll have to admit that I am quite curious as to what exactly happened to the Shirakumo of your world. The green-eyed man took a moment before responding. Well, he died, but he came back. The creature's beady eyes blinked from behind the white china as he took another sip of matcha. What an interesting answer. Dying and coming back. It was possibly a case of misinformation unless All for One and his doctor cooked up a way to revive corpses, which was not entirely impossible considering the nature of Naumus. It was disappointing to see that humans subjected even their own kind to experiments. Nezu of all people should know what such a crime entailed. He hoped that what happened to Shirakumo could be reversed or at least manageable for the teen should he wake up. That would be a long road of recovery. The underground hero took his silence as an encouragement to continue. I did not know that I would find him there. You see, in the process of making Kurogiri, the doctor also erased his memories as Shirakumo. Seeing as he played a crucial role for the League, I decided that I would take him away while I could. Kurogiri's warp quirk is powerful, as you might as well know from what I have told you about the original members of the League of Villains, Midoriya explained. But we found a way for him to regain his old memories and managed to gain an ally of sorts. Nezu filed all of the new info away for later use. After all, this was the first time Midoriya gave him more information about the future after their discussion that took place one day after the man's vision of his original world. He would have to write it down in a coded notebook for the events of the future that he kept in a quirk-proof safe. Then, it is quite fortunate that you found Shirakumo. I'm sure that a way to his recovery will be found in this universe too, the creature said. The freckled man hummed, I hope so too. But he appears to be in the middle stage between his appearance before his death and Kurogiri's appearance. Therefore, I think there is still the possibility of memory loss. Well, I have already gathered some information on his background. It is only a matter of time before the police and the doctor confirm that the boy is indeed Shirakumo, the first UA hero student to die during internships. The principal took a break to sip his tea, which was almost finished, before continuing. I doubt his previous guardians would be able to provide everything he needs and look after him efficiently, seeing as Shirakumo lived in an orphanage. Midoriya blinked. Oh, he would need much more help than what an orphanage's budget can offer. So, I have a sponsoring plan for him in mind. After all, he got injured and died on UAS watch. The creature's face darkened as the events that dragged down UAS reputation and caused the principal before him to resign flashed through his mind. He would be doing anything he could to ensure that no such situation happened in his time at this institute, and that included preventing what was going to happen in the future. It is only fitting that UA takes responsibility for that, and I don't doubt if His Purple Highness were to catch wind of it, he might even want a part in that program. The creature finished his cup of tea. At Midoriya's questioning look at the hero's name, the creature explained that Shirakumo and another classmate of his called Aizawa interned under His Purple Highness. Something flashed through the man's green eyes at the mention of Aizawa. Before Nezu had time to ponder on what it might have been, the conversation got steered to hero codenames, which he did not mind. It was not as if he had more things to add. From how the freckled man also went on a quite resourceful analysis on how most heroes chose their names and how their names reflected on them, he did not mind it either. He apologized after he had finished though, saying that he should not have gone on a tangent and telling him to excuse his lack of filter between his mouth and brain. To be frank, the principal had nothing against listening to an impromptu but well-structured talk. This might have been the reason why Midoriya was close with his alternate self. The rest of the visit was spent on a lighter note. Nezu made sure to remind the hero to actually sleep as it was his off day before taking his leave. Izuku was on his way to the Musutafu General again, but not in his hero costume this time. Just in a plain black shirt, a gray cardigan, a pair of black pants, and a medical mask. After all, he promised Tenko that he would come to meet him again, and he did, even though he was a day late. The black-haired man chose to not wear his hero gear because he did not want his hero persona to be a regular at the hospital. He was risking his underground hero status in the first place by coming to meet the boy in the first place. More importantly, he did not need people making connections between his civilian persona and his hero one, especially if those people were from the wrong side of the law. Thinking back, he couldn't believe he promised the blue-haired boy that he'd come back. They were nothing but strangers. Well, they were not exactly strangers, but as a hero, he was supposed to be professional. And that one little fact almost made him blush when the two undercover heroes, possibly underground ones, inquired the reason for his visit and requested to see his face and his identification card. Izuku denied their request and instead fished out his hero license from his wallet. "Oh, you are the hero involved in the boy's case. Do you still need to investigate the boy's story, Zeal-san?" Izuku tried to keep his face perfectly normal and not red as an apple, which he somewhat succeeded, something like that. One of them lingered his gaze on the bag in the freckled man's hand, but they let him pass. Giving them a nod, he quickly faced the door, the tips of his ears reddening. Thankfully, his hair covered them. He knocked. A small voice from inside hesitantly said, "Come in." The boy tensed when he saw him as he was out of his hero costume, and Tenko had never met his civilian persona. "Who are you? Those people said they wouldn't let strangers in." "Oh." Izuku took off the medical mask. "It's me." Hello, Tenko." The blue-haired child blinked at him. His previously frowning face morphed into a shy smile before he responded, "Hello." The freckled man sat down in the chair exactly where he sat 2 days ago. For someone who voluntarily came to see a hospitalized child, he somehow did not know what to say and was feeling a bit awkward. "I brought some snacks for you, buddy. I don't know what you like and I didn't want to come bare-handed. You've been eating hospital food since you got here, right?" Red eyes were trained on his face, observing him with a light. Izuku did not know what to make of it. Was he making a fool out of himself in front of Tenko? The boy must be thinking how hilariously awkward Izuku was. Tenko nodded, his gloved hands holding the blanket thrown across him. He uttered a soft thank you. The man took it upon himself to show him the snacks as he noticed red eyes looking at them. "Here are those mini milk buns, you might remember them. I also bought a couple of lollipops. Maybe don't eat both of them or I don't think the nurses will like that. May I have the buns?" Izuku nodded and the blue-haired boy took the packet of buns from him and opened it before offering him a mini bun back. "We can share. My mom said sharing is caring." The boy averted his eyes. Whether from discomfort or from embarrassment, the man did not know. But he knew he certainly did not want it to be the former. But considering he mentioned his mother, who died due to his quirk accident, I haven't tried that myself. "Thanks, kiddo." Izuku mustered up a suitably wide smile. He accepted the offered snack. The cubic-shaped bun looked so small, dwarfed by his own hand. They munched both of their respective mini buns before the man remembered that there was still an item left. "I almost forgot. I also bought a cup of hot chocolate for you, but well, it's not hot anymore. Do you want to drink it now? Maybe later, Zeal-san." "Thanks again." The words came out a bit muffled as the boy hadn't finished chewing the milk buns in his mouth, but he was polite enough to cover his mouth when he talked. Hearing Tenko refer to him as Zeal-san made him blink. It sounded weird, as if the boy should be calling him by his name and not his hero codename. However, it would not be logical to reveal his civilian name to a 6-year-old who was nothing to him but a reminiscence of a failed mission of his. Izuku gave a nod back. Silence fell between them until he noticed Tenko glancing at the lollipops every now and then while munching on the bun. Offering one of the lollipops to Tenko, he said, "You can have one if you want to. It's All Might themed." The boy's face was awfully blank. Oh no, had Tenko already started hating the #1 hero? How was this possible? Did his father instill that kind of hatred into the boy even at a young age? The freckled man did not know the full story of Shigaraki. Therefore, he could not be certain just how the blue-haired boy felt about All Might. He only took the All Might-themed ones partly because of old habits and partly because he did not expect Tenko to dislike the hero already. He must have shown some of his confusion on his face as the child continued, taking the sweet from his hand. "My father did not like heroes, especially All Might. I don't know why." Green eyes gazed into darkened red eyes which were staring at the candy in his hand. That made sense. A man of Shimura origin would hate to be reminded of heroes while one abandoned him even though he was her son. "Are you okay with this candy, buddy? If you don't like it, I could take it back with me." The boy shook his head, his gloved hands already peeling the plastic cover of the lollipop. "I have never eaten one like this. I think I want to try it." "Thank you, Zeal-san." Tenko had been thanking so many times. While that was not necessary, it was good to know the kid still had manners. Izuku hoped those future foster parents of the child would do a good job at raising the boy. Shimura-san would be smiling from above to see her grandson living a peaceful and good life. He was certain of it even though he had not met the Vestiges again for 9 years. The light-haired boy bit off one of All Might's signature bangs before scrunching his little nose and asking in a hesitant voice, "I'm eating All Might." Izuku could not hold off his chuckle. "Well, if you put it that way, I ate All Might plenty of times when I was a kid." And he also literally ate All Might's hair once. A similar chuckle which also escaped Tenko made it all the more worthwhile to change this world's future. Zeal-san, those men in uniforms came yesterday. The police. The boy looked at him for confirmation and Izuku nodded. "So," Tenko resumed, "they said I had to live with another family after all of this." The boy averted his eyes again, his expression showing that he was thinking really hard about something. Izuku braced himself from the silly yet out-of-this-world questions that only kids were capable of asking to the extremely serious ones that only a traumatic kid would ask. Before the hero could overthink, the younger said in a soft voice, I don't want to live with strangers. Can I not, please? Sadness on Tenko's face made Izuku want to ignore the witness protection program and grant the boy's wish, even though for Tenko, everyone was a stranger now unless he had a close relative or family friend who wanted to take him in. But if wishes were horses, Izuku clasped his hands together on his lap, palms suddenly sweaty for some reason. In front of him was a kid with familiar colors and a familiar expression. Red eyes that conveyed how much he did not want to go with those who he deemed as strangers. An expression that was awfully as desperate as Iri's when the green-eyed man met her for the first time at the entrance of that alleyway. The only differences were that Tenko would be safe under the witness protection program and that Izuku had no right to deny him that protection. There was nothing he could do to make the boy's wish come true. Where would he live if not with those foster parents under the program's protection? He couldn't come to UA with Izuku like Iri did because there was no connection between UA and the little Shimura. Not to mention, if his suspicions were right, All for One would be on his tail, trying to get revenge on the underground hero who destroyed his plans. Izuku started, only to trail off. He tried again. Tenko, I can understand what you mean. Living with strangers can be scary. Right, buddy? The blue-haired boy nodded, putting away the snacks except for the All Might lollipop he was holding in his gloved hand. He whispered, what if I lose control of my quirk again? What if they are as bad as my that man? The bitterness the man did not want to hear from a child's mouth was sewn deeply into the last two words. I'm sure they are nice. I know who they are. The man scooped his chair nearer to the bed. They have a nice record of taking care of children. They are also former heroes, so they should be able to take care of both you and themselves. There will also be more people guarding you. Do you know what that means? Tenko was chewing on his lower lips, the hand that was not holding the candy rubbing his neck. Izuku was glad to know that he was not scratching it, taking the hand that was rubbing the already scarred neck gently into his hand so that the boy did not irritate the healing scratches there. He continued, that means the police and I have chosen them because they are nice people. At least, can you trust me, buddy? The younger of the two nodded. The man couldn't help but smile at him. It was a nice thing to be aware of. So how about you give those people a chance? If you don't like them or if they are bad, you can tell me you're one of those police officers or the guards. Red eyes looked down. But you would not come again, would you? You are a hero and heroes have other things to do than come see me. Would Izuku come to see Tenko again? The man himself hadn't given much thought to it. It would not be that much of a bother to keep in contact with the child, but at the end of the day, they were just strangers. Well, not complete strangers, but a hero and a civilian. But there was not any rule that forbade heroes from checking on civilians they had once saved, right? The freckled man offered, I might be able to come meet you. After all, I am a hero. I should come there to check on you, shouldn't I? The boy seemed to brighten up a little at that. He looked up and asked, so will you be there when I meet those strangers? Please? Izuku internally winced. Those wide red eyes made it almost impossible to say no to Tenko. Almost. The child services suggested providing him therapy, as there was no way the child was not traumatized after all that had happened to him, and also quirk counseling for his volatile quirk. Luckily, the Shimura family's finances could be used to fund both of them. Even if the foster parents could not afford it, Tenko would be getting therapy and quirk counseling thankfully. The officers were planning to introduce Tenko to his soon-to-be foster parents after 3 more days. And Nezu had requested a meeting with Izuku on that day just this morning, stating that some people had requested to meet him. Oh, the principal told him just who these people were. All Might and Gran Torino. No, Sir Nighteye would not be there, as the green-eyed man could remember the exact date the Foresight hero joined the Might agency from all those fanboying sprees. He knew better than to think it was a complete coincidence that those two heroes contacted Nezu instead of approaching him directly. It was apparent that the creature planned this if what he said after dinner yesterday was any indication. And he did not really mind it. As soon as he could keep his composure, no one would suspect a thing. But he did not think the principal deliberately arranged it so that Izuku couldn't go to Tenko. At least, if this Nezu was not that different from the Nezu from his home world. I'm afraid I have a meeting to attend that day. I'm sorry, Tenko. How about the day before or after that? Even before he could finish that sentence, the boy averted his eyes and was already scowling down at his blanket. No, you said you'll come to me again. Why can't you? The boy cut himself off with a strange expression on his face, his hand leaving Izuku's as it fisted the blanket. To be honest, Izuku did not know what to do. He could only explain so much to a 6-year-old. Even though he could handle children, he knew nothing of handling tantrums of a child as young as Tenko. Most children did not throw tantrums when they saw the symbol of hope. Even if they did, their parents would be there to handle it. Thankfully, Tenko did not throw a tantrum, although it was obvious that the boy was upset. But the silence between them that lasted for only a second made the man more uncomfortable than a tantrum would have. The boy's head was still hanging low as he said in a small voice, "Sorry, Zeal-san." Izuku let out a quiet sigh and licked his lips. "It's okay, Tenko. I'm sorry I wouldn't be able to be there with you. Do you want a hug, buddy? We can talk this out." Talking always helped. If it didn't, then wait for a bit and then try again. It would work. The red-eyed boy nodded, so Izuku scooped him over onto his lap. The small child sitting sideways, bundled up in the blanket he was holding. Tenko glanced at the candy still in his hand and said that he didn't want to eat it anymore. So, the older man took it from him, thankful to his past self for having the sense to keep the wrapper. Tenko might want to finish it later. "I'm sorry for shouting at you. I was too childish," the child leaning on his chest murmured. It saddened him that a child was apologizing for being childish. Tenko should have had a chance to be the child that he was. "I just think it would be easier with you there. 'Cause, you know, you are a good hero." The boy fell silent for a moment. Izuku readjusted his arm that was supporting Tenko from behind. The older man was going to thank him for the compliment when he got interrupted by a muffled voice, "You are my hero." It was almost astounding how overjoyed the man was to hear that one sentence. "Thank you, and I'm glad I could be your hero. Although it was bad to shout at someone, I can let it go this one time. I know you are a good kid, Tenko." And apparently, good kids did not get to be on fate's good side. His free hand came up to ruffle the light blue hair. "And I'm sorry I can't come. I have a meeting, you know. A meeting with other heroes. So when do you want me to come, before or after that day?" It was natural for a hero to keep in contact with the one they saved if they wished to, wasn't it? Besides, he was just helping out Tenko. "I don't know. When are you free?" "You don't even have to come really." Izuku hummed, "I'd like to come if it helps you, Tenko. How about after you have met those people? That way, I will know if you like them or not." After a moment, he received a nod against his chest. Someone knocked on the door. Izuku put on the medical mask which was hanging from his ear again as the red-eyed child called out permission to come in. A nurse came in. It was the same one as when Tenko fell asleep on his lap after that talk. "Oh, hello. I didn't know Tenko would be getting a visitor." The child on his lap was looking at the nurse curiously. And in turn, she was looking at Izuku curiously. Yeah, I was just checking up on him." "Oh." The woman waited for more, but when the underground did not offer any more information, she said, "Well, I'm sorry to say, but the visiting hours end in 3 minutes. I hope you have not just arrived here." Izuku glanced at the clock. He should have been keeping track of the time. The boy was looking up at him with those red eyes again. "You're going to go?" "Yeah, buddy, I have to. The rules must be followed." The older man moved Tenko onto the bed again. The younger still bundled up in the blanket. Izuku smiled under the mask, hoping the other could see his smile even if the mask was in the way. "Don't worry, you'll see me again, buddy. And I'm sure the people you are going to meet are nice. Just give them a chance." "Give us a chance, okay." "Okay." A nod accompanied the word. "Bye-bye." "Goodbye, Tenko. Make sure to rest lots and eat lots. You'll be out of the hospital in no time." After giving the boy one last pat on the head, Izuku made his way to the door. But Tenko spoke again. Thanks for coming today." His freckled cheeks should be hurting by how much he was smiling. "It's okay. I promised after all, didn't I?" The child nodded wordlessly again with a small smile of his own. "See you again, Tenko." "See ya." Tenko shyly waved. His blurry vision was strangely bright instead of the green and dark background he tended to see whenever he regained consciousness. Yes, consciousness, because he knew he was not simply sleeping. Aburo Kurajiri Obo Oboro knew that the bald man with goggles he had once seen during the times when his eyes were open was no ordinary villain. There must be a reason why he was wearing surgical gloves, masks, and even a white lab coat. Fortunately, that man was nowhere to be seen. In fact, there was no one in his vision except the white spotless ceiling above like the one you would usually see at a hospital. The only problem was that he was not sure whether it was a real hospital or what you see when you finally kicked the bucket and were admitted into heaven or some other higher place up there. He was strangely talkative in his head, wasn't he? Or rather, he was thinking almost consciously instead of those jumbled thoughts he tended to hear those times back in that dark room wherever that room was located. That showed that he was more vigilant. But where was Master? What was he to do? What was his duty? Kurajiri Aburo tried to move his hands, and to his relief, he could actually feel and move both of them. So, he tried his luck at shifting his head a bit, even though a sharp pain shot up behind his left eye. He succeeded in the endeavor. He wiggled his toes too. After a second, he decided to try to sit up. Since the headboard had been raised to a certain extent, it didn't take that much of an effort. The first thing he noticed was that, yes, he was in what appeared to be a hospital room. He let his eyes trail towards his own body. Why was his hand covered in dark purple mist? Was it a quirk of a nurse or a doctor? Why was his right not his normal appearance? He could only exist in mist form. What happened to his body? Was this the work of his master? A sudden ringing in his ears stopped all his thoughts, shifting the focus onto the noise itself and the dull pain behind his eye. His eyes roamed across his body. No apparent injuries and no pain except the aching behind his left eye. His whole left side was covered in the strange mist-like substance that clung to his very skin. He brought his hand closer to his face. The dark purple mist moved along as he curled his fingers. The teen peeked underneath his shirt and found most of his whole left was covered in the mist. Just how injured was he? The last thing he remembered was going out for a jog just the day after his first sports festival. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that he tends to do when confused or tired, only to find out that his hair was shorter than he expected. The two short bangs that once framed his face were missing. "Oh, you're awake. That's great news." He immediately turned towards the direction of the voice. A woman dressed in what Oboro he assumed to be a doctor's duty coat was walking towards his bedside. He internally winced at the sight of the white coat. Not wasting a moment, he asked, "Where am I?" Or rather, he tried to ask but his voice failed him. The doctor handed him a cup of water with a straw in it. He smiled at her thankfully. He tried again. Even though his voice was hoarse, the whole question came out at least. "Nisutafu General, Hero Ward, my dear. You have been unconscious for 3 days, 4 if you count today." She checked the various medical machines and jotted down some notes to the patient chart. "You came here unconscious, so we don't really have much information about you. A good thing you woke up, huh?" He nodded along. He wordlessly complied with her instructions as she poked at the various spots of his body, looking for pain, flashing a light into his eyes, and other tests to ensure his body was well-oriented. Then, the woman asked, "Now would you mind answering some questions?" The patient nodded. "Do you remember your name?" He smiled internally as they were starting off with an easy standard question. He opened his mouth to answer but words got stuck in his throat just like how his breath seemed to. He knew his name. It was Oboro. The ringing noise along with the fast beeping from the heart monitoring machine suddenly announced their presence and the pain behind his eye became more intense. He furrowed his eyebrows. No, who was this Oboro? His name had been Kurogiri since the day he had been created. Was Oboro another name Master wanted him to take? My name is another spike of pain cut him off. He almost wanted to gauge out his left eyeball just so that he would no longer have a place to feel that pain in. His respiratory systems seemed to betray him as he gasped for breath. Unknown to the panicking teenager, his shaking hands found their way to his head, tugging at the short dark purple strands of his grown-out buzz cut. As the mist concealing his entire left side flared up, the room became darker because of the purple clouds coming out of his body, obscuring both his own form on the bed and the light coming from the window on his left. "Are you okay? Can you hear me?" Yes, he could hear the other woman, but it sounded like his head was underwater. "Please calm down. Take a deep breath. You are going to be okay." Through his blurry vision, he could see the doctor trying to touch him and talking. Unfortunately, however, he was sinking deeper. Izuku's clothes were luckily quite comfortable to move in. He made his way to where Shirakumo was, jogging along with one of the underground heroes guarding Tenko. They figured that one should be left behind so as not to let Tenko be unprotected. By the time they arrived, they could see dark purple clouds obscuring the entrance and some spilling into the hallway. The 2 guards assigned to watch the boy trying to go in but to no avail. When Izuku was just about to walk away from Tenko's hospital room, news of an unknown quirk getting out of control and trapping both the quirk user and the doctor checking in on him in the hospital room reached the 2 underground heroes. As usual, he offered his assistance. His knowledge about Kurogiri's quirk might help. "We are here. What's the situation?" One of the guards turned around from poking at the cloud wall and said, "We've tried to walk through the clouds, but there is a barrier 9 or 10 inches after the clouds. And as you can see, it's certainly not the door." The heroine beside Izuku asked, "What about the doctor and the patient? Do you have any contact with her?" "Yes, she's on the phone with me right now." A nurse spoke out, waving the phone in his hands, thankfully conscious and unharmed. "They are just trapped inside, among all the dark mist and clouds. The patient is panicking and has not responded ever since." The freckled man frowned under his mask. "But that means they are under the risk of suffocation. We have to solve this as soon as possible." He strode towards the door. The 2 guards, after receiving a nod from their colleague, stepped aside and made space for the man to observe. Nodding thankfully at them, Izuku carefully reached into the clouds. His hand sank further until he felt a cold, glass-like surface. Curious, he knocked gently. "Zeal, I think it's her hand at the window." She was pointing at the glass window just beside the door. "So, a space-folding quirk, then." Turning back, Izuku agreed with Ms. Fierce, the heroine who came together with him. "I have an idea. Please stand back. I cannot guarantee the result, but I think it has a high chance of working. Do any of you want to propose your own idea?" They said they would see if his solution works, but not before explaining his plan to them. He did. Tenya had once told him how he managed to escape Kurogiri's gate at USJ. It seemed that the gate could be held shut or restrained with physical force just like Shaoji did with his arms. That discovery helped a lot in the past. Hopefully, Shirakumo's quirk would not be different. The freckled man rolled up his sleeves. He did not want to destroy the clothing that Nezu had generously provided for him. Calling forth Five's quirk, 6 whips shot out from his hands and forearms. Izuku furrowed his brows in concentration as he carefully guided the whips to slowly slip into the space between the doorway and the edge of the cloud barrier. After the whips had been stationed, he pulled the barrier into a smaller shape. At first, the gate refused to close, but soon enough the clouds were contained and wrapped with his black whips. Izuku stepped into the room, his eyes immediately spotting the doctor, who was anxiously hovering near a dome of dark purple mist and cloud. Judging by the fact that Shirakumo was nowhere to be seen, the poor boy must be trapped inside it. He let the other heroes handle the doctor as he approached the mist globe. Green eyes went over the legs of the hospital bed that were peeking out from beneath the sphere. So, it was not a gate, thankfully. He wondered if he should reach into it. He did not want to alarm the teenager any further, no matter whatever mental state he was in. Hirajiri had told him that his original quirk was a mere cloud manipulation quirk that affected the size, amount, and density of clouds. Extending a hand and touching the sphere, Izuku found out that he could probably penetrate it if he used a bit of strength. So, using about 5% of One for All, he slowly spread the mist. Inside was the curled-up form of the teen he carried on his back while retreating from All for One, the vessel and base of one of the main players of the league, and also a friend of his teachers who helped them after he recovered. The only difference was his appearance. Wrong. This world's Shirakumo would be a completely different person. This world was going to be different. Izuku stopped his thoughts. It would only serve to delay his duties as a hero. There was no time to waste. Can you hear me? I am an underground hero. We are here to help you. There was no response from the teen. A mist and cloud tried to cover him again, holding them at bay. The freckled man turned to Ms. Fierce, who was still in the room with him and Shirakumo. Could you please ask the doctor what triggered him? The teen is in the middle of a panic attack and I need to know so that I can bring him back again. She gave him a nod before exiting the hospital room. Thankfully, the dark purple clouds did not try to conceal the doorway again. Izuku gently coaxed the unresponsive boy into a normal sitting position. Blinking at the sight of glazed eyes, he noted that one of them was blue and the other glowing yellow with no pupil. His whole body was trembling. A tendril of purple clouds floated into his vision. The underground hero batted it away before trying to make the teen less concealed. Apparently, the doctor just asked his name. Then, he went into a panic attack, said a voice behind him. Izuku nodded. Thanks, Miss Fierce. I think he is past the panicking stage. It looks more like dissociation, but I can be wrong. We will need a professional. Of course, until someone comes, I will try my best. Please notify the staff. Roger. It was instinctual for him to fall into the role of planning and leading. The freckled man just hoped that he was not overstepping any boundaries of his fellow heroes by taking charge. He was, after all, a newly graduated hero in the eyes of everyone except Nezu. But they did not seem to mind. Or at least, he thought so. He moved so that he was in Shirakumo's direct line of sight. He should not use the name Shirakumo because that was one of his possible triggers. So he just settled on not using any name at all. You are currently at Musutafu General Hospital, and you are under protection. I am Zeal, one of the heroes protecting you. Can you try to match my breathing? He asked, taking one pale hand and putting it over his heart. The teen's eyes seemed to be less glazed as he jerked his head in a nodding motion. Green eyes kept contact with the mismatched eyes as the younger of the two inhaled, held his breath and exhaled shakily. You're doing great. Now, how about you tell me 5 things you can see? Izuku gave him a gentle smile even though the teen couldn't see it. A hoarse voice rasped out, your mask, the mist covering my left side, and he glanced around. There are still clouds and mist in the room, but they had been slowly receding. The window, a gray coat, and also the bedside table. Well done. Now keep breathing steadily. Also, tell me 4 things you can feel. Shirakumo blinked twice before speaking. Your hand, some kind of fabric, I think wool. That's what you're wearing. And also, the bedsheet. Yes, the bedsheet's underneath me. And his mist-covered hand roamed around. And the blanket. Izuku nodded, doing good. Now, do you know where you are? Musutafu General. Yes, you are right. How about your age? The underground hero released the hand he was holding up as the teen was breathing normally now. The room brightened up a little as the clouds obscuring the window disappeared. The teen blinked particularly hard. For a second, the freckled man was worried that he asked the wrong question. But he got an answer, a confusing one but an answer nonetheless. 15, soon to be 16. Wasn't his internship with His Purple Highness during his 2nd year. Glancing back, Izuku saw a doctor and Ms. Fierce at the doorway. So, he said, good job. I should go now. The doctors will help you, more than I can do so. Take care and good luck. Shirakumo turned towards the door, but his eyes looked back at Izuku with uncertainty in them before nodding and thanking him. The underground hero let the doctors take charge before exiting the room. The incident ended fairly well with no injuries, but the last answer Shirakumo gave him worried him. He should have expected this outcome, really. It would be best to inform Nezu of this too. You are quite capable for a newbie. The green-eyed man glanced at the heroine walking beside him. It is almost like you have experienced such things. He let out a chuckle at that. I'm just lucky, that's all. If only she knew. They parted ways when the elevator reached Tenko's ward, giving each other respectful nods and greeting. As he walked out of the hospital, Izuku could not help but think that the road they were on was certainly going to be bumpy. Tenko, Tashinori, Shirakumo, and last but not least, all for one. But he had already sworn to himself that he would help this world in any way he could. So, there was no way out but forward. And forward, they were going to march on. I am certain that you are more than qualified to take on this position. Izuku couldn't help but disagree. But, sir, I'm just a nobody in this world. Wouldn't it be suspicious if a rookie underground hero suddenly becomes an instructor, even a part-time one, at UA? There are so many ways that could go wrong with him accepting the position of the quirkless fighting instructor for heroic student. Most importantly, he needed to be under the radar. Everyone and anyone could be All for One's spy. The man regretted that he did not discuss those times before the first fight of All for One and All Might. It was such a rational thing to do that he wondered if his brain had wandered off when it should be dealing with that topic. Well, it was not like he needed to know those details at that time. Gran and Tashinori did not mention any names nor any specific details while retelling how they chipped away All for One's reign over the underground piece by piece until All Might and All for One clashed for the first time. It will be just 2 sessions a month for each class, altogether 12 sessions a month for all heroic students enrolled in UA, Midoriya. Moreover, we've hired underground heroes before and we've kept their civilian identities perfectly under wraps when needed. Nezu set down his teacup before continuing. Would teaching suit Izuku? Could he even teach? To be frank, it would be nice to try teaching. Moreover, he could just go incognito as Zeal without revealing his face nor identity. Although it is I who built this school from its very foundations. The board likes to, how do I put it, know that they are contributing to UA in some way. Certain people are going to ask questions if they discover that a man with no connection to UA is living on its grounds. The freckled man had an inkling as to what Nezu meant. But of course, if push comes to shove, I can always just the mammal never finished his sentence, opting to simply sip his still steaming tea. Once again, Izuku had an inkling as to what Nezu meant. The white creature smiled sunnily at the man as if he didn't imply what he just implied. But I would really like you to teach my students here. In this world, I might be the only person who knows your true abilities, and I'd like to change that. Only for your quirkless fighting techniques, of course. We wouldn't want to advertise your true capabilities, would we? Quirkless. There was a reason why he polished up that particular skill, even after high school. He practiced and excelled so that he could survive without a quirk. Without one for all, a power that could be passed down, had been passed down and would be passed down. But to be honest, Izuku no longer believed the last one was necessary nor possible. After all, its purpose has been fulfilled, and he was away from his home world. It would not be great for 2 passable quirks to exist in one single world. Just imagine 2 one-for-all users running around breaking bones left and right. Izuku probably deserved Aizawa-sensei's name for him. He could certainly imagine how problematic one-for-all could be. Coming back to the problem at hand, the man himself did not really have a solid reason as to why he should be refusing. It was a perfect opportunity to pay Nezu back as well as kill some time. There are not many things to do besides filling out the paperwork, which was less than he was used to as he had to tone it down a little during patrols, eating, sleeping, and researching both about dimension travel and All for One's network. Being a top hero demanded far more time than being a rookie underground hero. Underground heroics were quite interesting though. Also, taking on another job would mean increased income. The man planned to pay his debt back and acquire a stable financial background even if he had only been in this world less than a month. I would like some time to think about it, sir, said Izuku, although he knew he would end up teaching at UA. UA was a school that housed the 8th successor of One for All without All for One meddling in any way. An underground hero who foiled one of his operations was less important than All Might, both the current one and the student one. Besides, from what he saw, he doubted that Nomus were complete. If so, at least a couple of them would have been released when he infiltrated their base. Of course, Midoriya. I should have mentioned this on a different day, but today seems a nice day to discuss this. A notification rang from the computer on Nezu's desk behind them. It seems our guests have arrived at the lobby. They are coming up. Izuku almost forgot that they were meeting to All Might in Gran Torino today during their earlier talk. And knowing Nezu, he probably offered the teaching position just before the 2 other heroes arrived because he probably knew that Izuku was anxious to attend this meeting. The headmaster had obviously caught on to the fact that the freckled man knew both of them personally. He did not mind it, to be honest. There was a chance that the principal might track down and meddle with Midoriya Izuku of this world once he knew that Izuku would become the ninth successor. However, it was not as if he was going to confess everything about himself and his relation to One for All to Nezu, however much the other had helped him in the near future. He'd like to keep a couple of things to himself. Telling the principal would not change anything, as there was no guarantee that the ninth successor of One for All would be the same person in this world. A part of it, Izuku hoped, would be because All Might would not have to choose a successor so urgently after his first fight with his nemesis. Would this world's Izuku even get to meet All Might and talk with him without the hero's time limit? Regardless of possible consequences, the freckled man fully intended to prevent and spare All Might from losing his organ. If he was going to associate with All Might and help him take down a centuries-old villain in this world, he was going to do so properly. That he could guarantee. And that was the reason why he was sitting in Nezu's office and waiting for All Might and Gran Torino to show up in his hero attire. First impressions were important, and he'd hate to present himself as anything less than a genuine and responsible hero. Thank you very much. Also, he definitely didn't leave his fanboy tendencies back in his home world. He had even bought some merch with however much money he could afford, including this really cute keychain of Bronze Age All Might. After all, if one was sent back into the past, then one should find ways to at least enjoy the experience. This was practically a second chance, even though it came with sacrifices, sorrows, and loss. He of all people would know. Therefore, Izuku would not be messing up his first meeting with the symbol of peace, and so his second chance at meddling with fate. Not to mention, Gran Torino, who was one of the mentors of said symbol of peace and a formidable hero himself, would also be meeting and judging him. Well, he hoped the older hero would not pull a prank on him this time, although it would be great to see him pull a prank in Nezu's office. Oh, they are here. Just in time. Nezu's remark made Izuku recheck his appearance and smooth down his suit. He decided to forego his mask to appear more open. A series of firm knocks came, and Izuku couldn't help but whip his head around to stare at the door, trying to will the tension in his shoulders away and out of existence. Nezu called out the permission to come in, and the door opened to reveal a figure he had not seen in a long time except in that debut video of All Might that he obsessed over in his childhood. Toshinori stood there, tall, strong, proud, and healthy in all his glory. Gran Torino was beside him. It was certainly a bit strange to see the younger version of the old hero, though. The underground hero stood up as not to disrespect him. Nezu was standing and walking towards All Might, who met the principal halfway before exchanging greetings and introducing Izuku, or rather Akatani Makumo. All Might, Gran Torino. This is the underground hero, Zeal. Zeal, meet All Might and Gran Torino. The freckled man bowed. A pleasure to meet you, All Might, Gran Torino. My name is Zeal, but you can also call me by my civilian name, Akatani Makumo. Normally, heroes would only introduce themselves by their codenames in this situation. However, to show that he had nothing to hide, he told the two heroes his civilian name. Both of them seemed surprised to hear his name, but they concealed it well. Gran Torino faster than All Might, who let out his signature laugh. Likewise, Zeal. This is a close associate of mine, Gran Torino. The blonde hero gestured towards Gran Torino. The older hero just gave him a nod and a smirk. Izuku bowed in response. Soon, all of them were seated with a cup of tea each, a plate of teiyaki on the table. Izuku was directly across the two heroes, while Nezu sat at the head since it was his office they were meeting. I'm sure all of us know why we are here. To discuss the recent case that Zeal solved involving one Shimura Tenko. Small talk isn't my style, so I'll cut the chase. Gran Torino grunted out, still not even touching a piece of his favorite snack strangely. I'd like to know a full recount of why you suddenly showed up with a bunch of information on All for One and his plans for Shimura. How you found the Shimura boy. Every details of the infiltration and the retreat, including what you saw in the doctor's lab. The man was aware that Nezu had told them certain details about him in the case. The two had already come up with a stable backstory with just enough information to show that Izuku could be trusted and was an ally. According to this backstory, he was related to a late follower of the villain who was killed by the villain himself. His fabricated late uncle left him with a journal of what he knew about Shimura Tenko and the doctor's quirk experiments. Therefore, with the intention to stop All for One, he came to Nezu and asked for his help. Nezu would vouch that he was not a spy of All for One. If the high-specs user himself vouched for his accountability, the two heroes ought to trust him, or so he hoped. They were leaving out the fact that he was from another world and that he knew the true nature of the two quirks. All for One and One for All, obviously. So, he said what he had to say, and by the expressions of the two heroes, they did not seem to doubt him. It was apparent that gaining Nezu's trust was the best decision he ever made. All Might was nodding along as Izuku explained how he got into the building which Tenko was taken to and his time there. There was a glint in Gran Torino's eyes. By the time he finished recounting, the two heroes were in various thoughtful expressions. Silence fell between them until the number one hero spoke. You did a good job in saving both young Shimura and young Shirakumo, Zeal. As a hero, I must congratulate you for the success of this mission. It was great to be on the receiving end of praise, no matter how small, from his mentor as always, even though the blonde hero in front of him was not really his mentor. The wide smile that his mouth twisted into was more real than the smiles Izuku was used to give out these days. A light blush covered his freckled cheeks, albeit his attempt to keep it down and make it disappear. After all, a red face was acceptable when faced with All Might's kind words. A part of him wished to become as close to this All Might as he had been with Toshinori. The only difference was that this time, it would be more difficult as he was just an outsider. Someone who was just assisting the symbol of peace in defeating the king of the underground, not the successor of a man behind the wide smile that was currently directed at him. Izuku's smile became tensed before he smoothed it out. He could not afford to mess up this meeting in any form or shape. He wanted to get in and help All Might, so he should be able to convey that one truth about him, even though most of what he just said were nothing but fabricated stories. It was not as if Nezu and he could tell the two men that he was from the future of another dimension. That would complicate so many things that it might even affect their plans for saving this world. Besides, their plans were and would always be the first priority. He had already decided to concern himself with the fate of this dimension. Now, he only had to play his part. Should be easy. Are you sure he can be trusted, Nezu? It was Gran Torino who spoke up. Nezu nodded. I am certain that all Akatani wants is to see the fall of All for One. He has already proven himself to me, and now by saving the little Shimura whom he knows to be the possible candidate of the heir of All for One, he has proven himself to you too, hasn't he? The older hero continued to keep eye contact with the creature before nodding and taking a piece of teak. Before biting into it, he said to Izuku, then, welcome aboard, lad. I'll be looking forward to working with you, Zeal, added All Might in his usual cheerful manner. Izuku discreetly let out the breath he didn't know he was holding and bowed his thanks. Likewise, Gran Torino, All Might. Thank you for believing me. I won't let you down. We'll see. You are the top candidate in the hero license exam you took, right? With almost full marks. Not bad for a zygote. Gran Torino bit into his favorite snack. Izuku felt a bit bad to take a long time, as the snack had probably lost its warmth by this time. The old hero did not seem to mind, munching away with a glint in his eyes. Thank you, sir. It was just luck. Besides, I needed the grant to be an independent hero right off the bat. Otherwise, I would not have been able to operate as I wish. I doubt they would let me track down a lost child as my first case. At those words, the number one hero cleared his throat before saying, I should probably explain the significance of your actions to you. Actually, Shimura Tenko is the grandson of my mentor, Nana Shimura. You see, she was a hero that opposed All for One and fought against what he stands for with all she had. That despicable man was probably planning to manipulate her blood into obeying him as some kind of twisted revenge against both her and myself. Even though Izuku knew all of this, he listened attentively, as Akatani Mikumo was not supposed to be aware of this. His green eyes widened as All Might bowed. Thank you for saving young Shimura, Zeal. I really appreciate your heroic deeds. It is what any hero would do, All Might, sir. Please don't bow. I'm honored to have been any kind of help. The freckled man could not stop his hand in time as it went up by itself to rub his neck. And you can call me by my name in private. It is still a bit strange to be called by my hero name. The last one was true. He kept expecting to be called by his first hero name, Deku. A part of him wanted to have some familiarity with this version of his mentor, even if it was just a matter of the way of being addressed. He quickly squashed down that tiny bit of him as soon as he became aware of it. He was not in the presence of Toshinori. He was in the presence of All Might, the number one hero who was hoping to work together to take down All for One. Then, you can call me Yagi too, Akatani. Nezu spoke up. Knowing each other names would fester trust among colleagues, for that's we are now, isn't it? We are in this together. The dark-haired man smiled at Yagi. Thanks, Yagi. But of course, I won't use your name in public, sir. Please. The buff hero laughed. Drop the sir. Sir is for Gran. Gran Torino quirked an eyebrow at both All Might and Izuku, blatantly choosing not to mention his own civilian name, which made the underground hero grin internally in determination. He would get past those walls, even though he would not admit all of the reasons why he would try to do so to anyone, not even himself. All Might continued, you certainly have both the power and the charisma to have a shot at being the limelight hero. Why did you choose the underground? Isn't the underground more dangerous, considering that it is where that monster lurks? True, even knowing what little Izuku could research and what Toshinori and Gran said to him back at his home world, All for One's influence is all over the underground. Nezu and I decided against being the limelight hero because that would bring too much attention to my activities and background. Izuku caressed the handle of the smooth porcelain cup with his thumbs. Being one of the underground would make me privy to things only the underground network would know. I still have a lot to learn about the whole society of the underground, of course. So far, I feel that our decision is the right one. No one would miss an underground hero if said hero simply vanished for the surface of this earth, except the ones who knew said hero personally. All Might nodded at his answer. Gran Torino hummed as he bit into another one of taiyaki. Speaking of power, Nezu started. You can count on Akatani here to, at least, hold his own against All for One's lieutenants. His quirk and also his fighting technique are quite remarkable. More attention on his quirk was the last thing he needed. He hoped that seeing Black Whip would annihilate any comparison with One for All. Moreover, he doubted that All Might was going to tell him about One for All. He was, after all, a co-worker, if a rookie underground hero could be called a co-worker of the symbol of peace. But wouldn't the top 2 hero, Deku, be worthy of that title though? He did not have time to think on such a meaningless topic. The green-eyed man directed an embarrassed smile at Nezu, half wondering why the creature was bringing up his quirk. Your quirk is called energy, right? Lighting and black tendrils do not normally mix together. Gran Torino mused. Suddenly, Izuku's stomach did somersaults. Was the old hero implying what he feared he would be implying? Did the bastard give you another quirk? Bile almost rose up his throat at the disgusting thought of receiving a quirk from a monster like All for One. Hopefully, the veteran hero would not connect his whips to those of Fifth's. There was no way that Gran Torino would know the details of Fifth's quirk. He repeated that thought in his head, trying not to show his panic. He did not know what the others saw on his face, but he had to answer that loaded question. No, my quirk has had those aspects since the beginning, sir. Besides, I have never met All for One face to face. I have only heard about him and his powers from my uncle. That's one powerful quirk, then. Izuku took a glance at Nezu, who was sipping his tea, hiding his expression behind the white china. Don't get him wrong, the principal was someone he could count on in this world. However, sometimes he forgot how curious the creature could be. After talking some more about Tenko's case and speculating what All for One's doctor did to the other victim, Shirakumo Aburo, the 2 visitors left UA with promises to keep in touch with Izuku. All in all, the meeting itself went well. He'd like to think he made a good first impression. His patrol was a mess. The underground hero started patrolling earlier than usual, running along the roofs just before the sunset. And that was when he spotted a very familiar man in his 40s, walking along the sidewalk and turning left just around the corner. Izuku could not help chase after him, his heart in his throat and green electricity and magenta glow in his veins covered by his dark hero suit. The rational part of his mind knew that the man who sent him to an entirely different dimension with the help of Trigger would not be taking a leisurely stroll down the sidewalk. The lump in his throat got heavier and more suffocating as he powered down and dropped into a crouched position on the roof of the 3-storied building, shaking his head at his idiocy. He resumed his patrol, shaking his head as he entered his living room and turned on the lights. The freckled man leaned on the wall beside the switch and closed his eyes. Shaking his head, he grimaced at how he almost got stabbed with a poison knife and how he wasted his time at the police station, filling out a form and accidentally making mistakes like a reckless, absent-minded fool. His feet automatically took him to his bedroom after getting out of his hero suit. His hand ran through his hair as he stared down at his bed. All the appeals of sleeping were meaningless for him. So, he would do a bit more research until his eyes wanted to sleep, which he hoped would be sooner than later. No, he was not running away. He was just carrying out his duties and doing what he had to do. Of course, he was just working if he never came back to his bedroom until after well past 7 a.m. in the morning to get one of his notebooks, then leaving immediately as if in a hurry. He would shower and clean up later. He just needed to finish this line of researching first. Maybe he would find something useful, like a way to go back to his own world. He pulled up the blanket to his chin, sighing softly under the warmth of it. The nightlight beside his bed was softly illuminating the whole room. The room which, to him, was still a foreign place that made him feel like he was intruding. Tenko let his eyes wander across the ceiling and traced the fluorescent stars and little moons, smiling at the green light from them. His thoughts went back to the events that happened almost 2 weeks ago. Well then, you ready? The woman, who introduced herself as a child service worker, asked him. He nodded. After some moments, the door clicked open to reveal a man and a woman, both smiling at him as soon as they laid their eyes on him and greeting him softly. He blinked at them, not knowing how they could smile at him. They must have been informed of what had happened to him and what he did. How could they still smile? Hey there, sport. My name is Ishikawa Rin and this is my wife, Mizuki. Tenko introduced himself back. He couldn't help but be worried around these new people, but Zil said that it would be nice if he gave these people a chance. Then, they talked a bit. He may still be young, but during his time on the streets, he learned a few things. You see, there were times he approached some people to ask for their help, but almost every one of them refused to hear his cry of help. After some time, he gave up trying to ask for help. No one would help someone like him. Even if they did, they could not do anything other than giving him some food. But even that only happened to him 3 times out of more than 30 people he approached. Even a hero brushed him away, saying that he should go back to his parents and muttering that he had to finish patrolling soon. He hated that hero and everyone else for not helping him. So, he learned to stop hoping and just stay away from people who would make things worse instead of better, until that one night when he made a mistake, got beaten by some drunk thugs, and then met Zeal, the hero who saved him. And Tenko liked Zeal for saving him. Back to what he had learned. He was to be ready for the bad things because he was a bad thing himself. But Zeal's green eyes had a gentle hue. So did those of the two strangers who came to see him. Ishikawa's eyes were somewhere between those of Tenko's favorite hero and those of Tenko's father. But the blue-haired child secretly thought that the other man had his own kind of nice eyes. His wife's eyes were gentle too. They looked at him kindly, unlike those Tenko met on the streets. But they were not as kind as his mother's eyes. The older man asked him about the things he liked, and Tenko answered that he liked playing heroes just to see how they would react. Both adults smiled, and they told him they had been heroes once. Did that mean he had to like all heroes? Tenko did not want to like every hero. He would rather like only those who were like Zeal. Not wanting to talk about heroes, the young boy added, I like playing video games too. Apparently, they were okay with it too. Was it going to be right to trust the underground hero then? The lady who was with him first explained why he had to meet these two strangers. It was because Tenko lost his family. Had also been kidnapped by dangerous people and needed someone to look after him. At least, he was not going to be thrown into jail. Jail was where villains went. The red-eyed boy did not want to go there. He was not a villain. Yes, he was. The Ishikawas were. Tenko soon realized. Nice to him. They were retired heroes. The funny mechanical leg that the man was wearing made Tenko think that the man sacrificed his leg while doing hero work. That might mean that the man was a good hero. Oh, Tenko, what about your favorite food? Snacks. The woman, Mizuki, smiled down at him from the side of his bed. The blue-haired boy looked down. His mother made really good tonkatsu, but he didn't think it was his favorite food anymore. His appetite would probably crumble away if he saw that familiar bowl of ramen, just like she did. So he just shrugged and said, I kinda like omeris. It was Hana's favorite. The rest of the first meeting went on. They just talked about some random things. Zeal, just as he promised, came to meet him the day after that. Although a part of Tenko wanted to say that the two retired heroes were bad people, he did not. Both because he knew it was not true and because he did not know who would look after him aside from these two that Zeal himself chose for him. The hero was happy to know that Tenko did not hate the strangers who came to meet him. At least, the older man brought the milk buns again. Also, Tenko learned that Zeal was not a normal hero and what an underground hero was. So, he should not be telling people the name of his hero as the presence of underground heroes was all hushed up. The dark-haired man brought some books too, with nice pictures. It was nice of the hero to read one of them to him. But he didn't say he would come back again. Then, the Ishikawas visited again 3 days after the first meeting and once more 2 days after that. On the 6th day, the officer lady and the couple told Tenko that the hospital was going to let him go in 3 days. So, Tenko would have to live with the Ishikawas after that. Mizuki came to the hospital every day since the boy learned that he would be moving in with the retired heroes, who were going to be his foster parents. The officer lady told him that the couple was going to become his foster parents and that for normal cases, this would still be too soon for a kid like him to move in with them. However, Tenko's case was a bit different because he got kidnapped, she said. And if the red-eyed child found himself wishing that Mizuki was a certain dark-haired man during the times she was with him in his hospital room, talking about things and reading some stories together with him, it was not supposed to be anyone's business. But Zeal did not come back to see him. The boy didn't see him all week. That was until the day he left the hospital. Now, we're ready to leave. Mizuki smiled down at him. I've already packed your things and my husband should have already finished all those businesses with doctors and nurses. So, we just have to wait for the police officers. Tenko dear. The boy nodded at the woman, playing with his gloves and fidgeting from his place on the bed. Someone knocked on the door and after being given permission, the door opened and a familiar dark-clad figure stepped into the room. The next thing he knew, he was hugging the legs of his hero. A gloved hand ruffled his light blue hair along with a voice saying, Whoa, hey there, buddy. I know you're excited but you should be careful. What if you tripped? The boy let go of the hero and stepped away. Sorry. No, it's okay. Just be careful, yeah kiddo. And it's nice to see you, too. The hero's eyes narrowed at him as if he was smiling through his mask before giving a small bow towards Mizuki-san. Good afternoon. I'm the hero assigned to accompany you to your house, Ishikawa-san. The car is ready. The lady returned the smile. Thank you. We're also ready to leave now. And judging from Tenko's reaction, you two must have met before. Oh, I'm just the hero who rescued him, ma'am. So may I help you with the bags? She nodded. Tenko didn't move from where he was standing until the woman said, Do you want to hold my hand? The boy glanced at the hero who was carrying 2 bags with both hands, both of which weren't too big for him, and decided that he should not make the hero hold his hand. Besides, he did not need anyone to hold his hand anymore. He walked fine without being held. He did it during his time on the streets. He certainly did not lose that ability. It'd be silly of him. No, thank you. I can walk on my own, Mizuki-san. Along the way out of the hospital, a pair of green eyes were watching him, trying to notice the slightest hint of unease, and glancing around every once in a while to ensure there weren't any threats. But the blue-haired boy didn't look back at the hero, so he never knew. When they arrived at the parking lot, there was already a white car waiting for them. The woman ushered him into the back seats together with her while Zeal and Rin were still outside, talking for a while as the hero put the bags in the trunk. Maybe Zeal would be sitting beside him. The boy scooped a bit towards his foster mother to make some room for his hero. It'd be nice to sit beside the underground hero. He smiled to himself, but it was Rin-san who sat beside him while the underground hero took the passenger seat. The blue-haired boy barely hid his frown as the driver started the engine. After some time, the car stopped in front of a fairly sized house and Mizuki did something with her phone to open the metal gates. The rest of it went in some kind of a blur. He just sat on the brown sofa in the living room, with a packet of milk buns that Zeal brought. From the corner of his eyes, he could see the underground hero talking with the Ishikawas. The hero hadn't talked to him much that whole day though. Tenko, hey there, buddy. Swallowing the bread he was munching on, he looked at the hero who crouched down in front of him. Hi. The hero smiled at him. Tenko could tell it even though the older man was wearing a mask. He gave the man his own small smile. I'm sorry I didn't come again. I thought you would need some time with your foster parents. And the lady from the child services also told me what you're up to. The boy nodded, looking down. He would not have been mad if Zeal had been there though. But the man was a hero, so he understood. A hero should be fighting villains instead of spending time with someone like him. It's okay, he softly said. You're a busy hero. I understand, Zeal-san. A hand patted him on the head, making him look up again. I should have checked on you more before you moved, but well, you were doing good and what's done is done. So, here, take this. The hero handed him a slip of paper. Red eyes read it with interest. It was a number scribbled out with a pen. The hero said in a low voice, if there is an emergency or if you don't feel safe in this house, just call this number. It is my hero phone, so I'll be able to answer even if I'm on patrol. Tenko couldn't help but stare at the paper with wide eyes. Zeal was giving him his phone number. He folded it carefully with two hands and put it in the pocket of the shirt he was wearing before hesitantly hopping off from the sofa to give the hero a hug, which the hero returned. Zeal's hug was as warm as the day he saved Tenko. Thank you. He stepped away after a moment or two because he didn't want the hero to waste time on him. But the older man still had more things to say to him. I'm sure that the Ishikawas are going to take good care of you, so you can also tell them if you need or want something, and they'll help you as long as it is reasonable. The hero took one of Tenko's gloved hands into his bigger and similarly gloved ones. They are nice people, and also, there will be heroes and police officers patrolling around this place. Some police officers might even be just across the street for the first week, just like they guarded you while you were in the hospital. Are you going to be patrolling around here? The child asked. The hero gave a yes, so he hesitantly continued, maybe. Zeal nodded again to encourage him. Maybe? Tenko stared at his feet, thinking whether or not he should say that, but he decided that saying that to the hero would not hurt. Maybe. Come and visit me if you have time. The older man hummed, I'll see what I can do, buddy. It'd be nice to check up on you too. The hero wanted to check up on Tenko. Yeah, his hero was a really good hero. He seemed like he cared for someone like Tenko. The younger of the two smiled wider at the answer before thanking the man. And also, as the lady said, there will be some doctors that you'll have to see for counseling. Both quirk and therapy, you know that, right? The hero took his hand into his again. Be a good boy and try to give them a chance too? Okay. They are going to help you. The blue-haired boy bit his bottom lip and whispered, what if the doctors are like the one who took me to that strange place? Tenko, I can guarantee that they are not going to be like that bad doctor. Besides, your guardians are going to be with you too. At least, his hero said it was going to be okay. He should believe that, so he nodded. You're going to be all right, buddy. And true to what Zeal said, Tenko was all right so far. At least, he thought so. The bed was comfortable. He had food to eat and water to drink. His first dinner with his foster parents was ominous because he said it was his favorite, so they listened to what he said. There were rules, of course, but he found that they were not much different from what his mother told him. There wasn't a rule against heroes like his father said though. The man and woman even listened to him when he talked a little about how good Zeal was. And they also gave him toys to play with and helped him read books too. The adults took him to a mall because he didn't have enough clothes. He got to choose the green and black shirt that reminded him of his hero too. So, even though it was a bit strange to live together with the Ishikawas, this was better than the streets. But that didn't mean he was safe from bad dreams. Tenko burrowed further into the mattress and closed his eyes, letting the glowing stars and moons fade into the dark behind his eyelids. Shouta slowly trudged into his own seat. The lunch break had just ended and his classroom was as noisy as ever. He sometimes wondered why it was the same as before. He knew he was not. Shouta, where have you been? I was waiting for you at the canteen. You said you'd come this time, my man, Yamada, the persistent blonde that Shouta had the luck to be stuck with, said or rather yelled. The volume of those words made him want to activate his quirk on instinct, but the other was just naturally loud even without his quirk. Maybe he ought to fake it till he made it because that was what the voice-quirked student was doing. He himself had no idea if the other was succeeding or not. They had not talked in a while. I did not make it in time, Shouta replied shortly. He told the truth this time. He truly lost time on the roof. He was reading this book on how different stances affect how efficient one's Parker and defense was. The clouds had been particularly interesting this afternoon too. Shouta, what do you think of the upcoming class? Must be interesting, yeah. It's been all the students have been talking about ever since it started last week. Yamada finally sat down, but it seemed like he still wanted to talk with Shouta. True. The next class seemed interesting enough considering the rumors that Principal Nezu himself recommended the teacher teaching that class. Quirkless fighting and fitness class? It would definitely be useful for non-combative quirks like Erasure, although it had the potential to make it harder for Shouta during spars. If one can fight fairly well without a quirk, what use would his quirk erasing glare have? But then again, that would mean that Shouta had to go beyond his limits. It was not like there was no exception to his quirk. More opportunities to practice with his capture weapon then. The dark-haired adolescent hummed. Interesting is one way to put it. Maybe you'll get detention if you accidentally use your quirk. Wouldn't that be interesting for you, Yamada? Shouta smirked at the other. The eyes behind those ridiculous tinted glasses glinted with an emotion that he couldn't comprehend before the blonde in question gasped dramatically. Are you saying that I don't have control over my quirk? Give me more credit, Aizawa. Yamada mock-begged, clenching his heart with both hands. Shouta let out a sigh instead of a smile. He ignored the use of his surname because it was better that way. It's all right, Shouta. You've got what it takes. That villain will go down in no time. The bell rang and a hush fell over the class, all of them clearly anticipating the arrival of this new part-time teacher. None of the students in UA had even seen the man outside of their class, meaning this would be their first meeting with the instructor of this class, as Class 3B was the last to have a period of quirkless fighting. The door opened and a plain dark-haired man in some kind of black jumpsuit stepped in. The man's toxic green eyes scanned the whole room as the class goggled at him back. Shouta sat up straighter, trying to recall if he ever heard of whether or not the new instructor was strict. The older man was looking quite serious as he stood behind the teacher's podium. But all of the students' prior thoughts disappeared when the teacher greeted them with a smile that oozed sunshine and rainbows even through the black mask he was wearing. His own dry eyes squinted at the new teacher. Why had he even thought the man would be strict? Everyone, nice to meet you. I'll be your instructor for your quirkless fitness and fighting class that you'll be having twice a month. I'm sure you guys have already guessed where this class is going to be taught. So, the masked man clapped his gloved hands twice and continued, put on your gym clothes and come meet me at Gym Delta. Soon they were in the gym. Their teacher standing in front of a set of sparring mats, hands clasped in front of him in a perfectly professional manner. Hey, come to think of it, he hasn't told us his name, murmured Yamada, who was beside him. Shouta wondered if the man forgot to introduce himself. If so, then what could he expect to learn from a man this careless and mindless? If it was not for the fact that UA only hired pro heroes, he would think that the man was just a normal civilian instructor, not a hero worthy of teaching others quirkless fighting techniques when most of the spotlight heroes relied on their quirks so much, maybe too much. But considering the current mystery surrounding the new teacher, he'd say that the man was either a hero too famous or an underground hero. The dark-haired student had already decided that he would work underground when he graduated. If this man was a member of the Underground Hero Society, this would be an amazing opportunity for Shouta. Talk about mixed feelings. He gave a wordless grunt to Yamada to indicate that yes. He heard him, and yes, he was curious about it too. The blonde might have understood what he meant and opened his mouth to say something when their teacher unintentionally cut him off. Okay, now that everyone is here and ready, let me start the lesson now. Then, he proceeded to lecture them about the importance of being able to fight without a quirk, even mentioning Shouta's own erasure quirk briefly, before he had them all paired up and sparring so that he could gauge how capable they were. Shouta easily took down his opponent, minding not to let his quirk activate instinctively. The teacher seemed to know what he was doing at least. He went around giving tips and corrections as they spar. He said that Shouta's form was quite good, and that could be because his quirk was not combat-oriented. The older man worded it like a compliment though. Unlike some people who thought just because he had erasure, he would suck at combat. Before the end of the class, the dark-haired instructor told them what to expect from his classes. Since you are in your final year of high school, you have already learned a lot, so I will be polishing up how to integrate your hand-to-hand combat to your quirk's fighting style. For those who have already achieved such things, I'll be focusing on improving your technique and giving you some tips and tricks. The rules of a classroom spar will not apply to those in the real world. We're going to prepare for that. Any questions? Yamada raised his hand. After the man nodded at him, he immediately asked, "What are we supposed to call you, sensei? You did not introduce your name." I was wondering when one of you would ask that. You can address me as Akatani-sensei." Another girl raised her hand and spoke up. "Sensei, what about your hero name?" "Well, I have already discussed that with other classes. You see, if you want to know my hero name, you will have to earn it. So, the first student who lasts 10 minutes against me in a quirkless spar in their class will be the first to know my hero name. I will not be surprised if you haven't heard of me though. I'm an underground hero." The man shrugged. The class immediately became excited. Shouted just narrowed his eyes. The new teacher was really playing this mystery card to the fullest. Moreover, he said that he was an underground hero. Well, at least, this class would not be boring. Mizuki liked to think they had been doing well in looking after Shimura Tenko, a child with a volatile quirk who had spent some time on the streets before being kidnapped and rescued. The boy himself was endearing, shy, well-behaved, and smart. The only problem was that he could get too quiet sometimes, and stared into space with sad and pained eyes that no child should have. Her hero and mother instincts reared up in her chest whenever the blue-haired child became like that, and she would try to cheer him up with his favorite things. But he still hadn't smiled wide even when she cooked his favorite food, read him the story that he found interesting, and tucked him in. Small tilted smiles were more often. Rin, and she would definitely like to make him grin in absolute happiness. Goodness knew Tenko deserved it. But of course, both of them knew they still had a long way to go. Namely, a long way which would consist of time, great memories, therapy, and quirk counseling. But she was determined to see the boy's red eyes become brighter, and so was her husband if the man trying to befriend Tenko and make him more comfortable. Even though the child seemed hesitant and even afraid to approach Rin sometimes, was any indicator. However, it didn't mean they weren't aware of the nightmares he was having. It was so alarming and heartbreaking to wake up to a child crying or worse, screaming for his mother to not go and not come near at the same time. Tenko's story was not a happy one. She had asked if he wanted to talk about his dreams, but he always refused. Therefore, as soon as she heard faint sniffles from Tenko's room just before she fell asleep, she threw off the covers and assured her husband, who was fumbling and trying to get up despite the fact that he wasn't wearing his prosthetic, "Rin, I've got this. You can stay here." "Ah, okay then. He'll be more comfortable with you anyways. But I'll be waiting." After nodding at her husband and exiting their bedroom, he walked down the hall and knocked on the boy's door, softly calling out, "Tenko dear, are you okay?" A sniff and then a small yeah. Mizuki tried again, "Okay, Tenko. Do you mind if I come in?" A beat or two passed before the child called out permission. She opened the door and saw the boy sitting against the headboard with his legs against his chest. Tear tracks were visible even in the dim light of the bedside lamp. She put on a smile and stepped further into the room. "Trouble sleeping?" The blue-haired boy nodded. "How does a late-night snack sound? I'll even warm up some milk and make hot chocolate." At the mention of the beverage, he looked up at her and nodded. They both traveled to the kitchen. Switching the lights on, she helped Tenko get into a chair at the dining table before asking him what he liked to eat. The boy just shrugged without a word, so she went for the safest option, one of the packets of small milk buns that they stocked up because the hero who saved Tenko told them that Tenko seemed to like them. She opened the packet for him and handed it to him with a smile, watching as his red eyes gleamed a bit at the sight of them. She turned around to prepare the milk and fetched the can of cocoa powder from one of the cupboards. Then, she glanced at the child only to see more tears dripping down his face as he silently ate the snack. "Tenko, what's wrong, dear?" A choked sob escaped as the boy stared back at her. She quickly put down the can and rushed to his side. "Is it the buns? Do you not want it?" The child shook his head no. "Oh, is there anything I can do, dear?" Tenko wiped off his tears with his sleeves and pursed his lips. She waited for his response because the boy was clearly thinking. He looked away from her as he said, "And may I have a hug?" "Of course." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm going to hug you now," she said before carefully drawing the boy in for a hug, loose and comfortable enough so that Tenko could draw away whenever he wanted to. One thing was for sure. She was not going to let the world beat down this child ever again. She would fight if she had to. After all, she had been a respectable hero back in her days. The green-eyed underground hero approached a certain house while sticking to the shadows that the city's nightlights failed to drive away. Earlier, he had unexpectedly run into a criminal who looked awfully bored trying to sell drugs just an alley away from Ishikawa's house on his way to visit Tenko. So, he had to stand guard until the police arrived and deal with the paperwork on the spot. The criminal's quirk, he theorized, must be one that allowed the user to produce and control at least one pair of extra eyes. What a useful quirk for information gathering. Now, the quirk's owner would probably be currently being escorted to the nearest police station. The hero wondered how far away he could control his eyes without losing connection. But right now, the traveler was standing in front of the gates of his destination, leaning in towards the device near the entrance. "Yes, may I ask who you are, sir?" a male voice curiously inquired. Izuku answered. "Hello, Ishikawa-san. I am Zeal, the hero who escorted Tenko here from the hospital along with the two of you. I know I haven't informed you of my visit and please excuse me for it, but I'm here to see Tenko and to check how he's doing. For good measure, he showed his hero license. Angled towards the camera, he noticed. Oh, by all means, come on in, Zeal-san. And that was how he found himself sitting in the familiar living room as he waited for Tenko to finish his shower. The former pro-hero couple sat together with him, kindly answering any questions he had, whether about the police and hero force guarding near their residence or about Tenko himself. Soon enough, faint footsteps were heard and so was a soft voice saying, "Mizuki-san, I'm Zeal-san." Izuku turned around just to catch sight of a black and white blur coming towards him before it made an impact, and in his arms was Tenko. The small smile that the action created was covered by his mask, but he could not deny its existence. "Oh, so you are Zeal." The hero couldn't help but joke as he ruffled the boy's hair. His teasing made Tenko pull away with a pout while shaking his head and saying, "No, I didn't mean it like that." The adults all smiled at his words, only one smile hidden behind a mouthguard yet still visible in his eyes. Izuku was glad he managed to save this red-eyed child. From the corner of his eyes, he could see the foster parents don similar smiles on their faces. Tenko offered him a small smile. He also gestured towards his black t-shirt with green accents as he said softly, "Look, we match." He couldn't help but smile wider, thus making his eyes narrower, and ruffle the boy's hair while the couple in the room exchanged a knowing glance. Both of them could clearly tell how attached to each other the hero and the child were. "Officially, you have been declared dead for about 1 year." That was not what he thought he would hear when Nezu-sensei, who introduced himself as the current principal of UA, visited him 2 weeks after he first woke up. He did not come alone. He was accompanied by a familiar hero going by the codename Zeal. And to be exact, that was not what he thought he would come to hear in his whole life. The patient blinked. I beg your pardon. You have been declared as killed in action during an internship in your second year at UA, the white creature repeated. Oboro could not make sense of it. Second year, internship. He did not remember anything about being a second-year heroic student who had got an internship. His head was all messed up, wasn't it? So was his body. He did not need the presence of the psychiatrist and the doctor responsible for his mental and physical well-being to be in his room currently, as the two heroes came to speak with him, to know that. He had that much self-awareness at least. That bit of information had been clear since the day he woke up in a different, yet similar, body and lost control of his quirk during his lapse in mental health almost 2 or so weeks ago. Oh, that was why the hero in the dark bodysuit beside Nezu seemed familiar. He had been the one to snap him out of that. What a small world. His mismatched eyes fell to the hands on his lap. One covered in mist tendrils and one as normal wrong as a human without a mutation quirk can be. Wrong. All wrong. Where is him? And the doctor. How the adolescent half covered in mist cleared his throat to fix his voice, which was suddenly hoarse with emotions. How did it happen? Nezu-sensei. I can't remember anything past, maybe 1 or 2 weeks before the sports festival in my first year. Nezu paused for a moment before answering him. You saved a class of elementary students from a falling building at the cost of your own life. It was only because of your action of saving them that your classmate, Aizawa Shouta, who was on the same internship, could focus on defeating the villain. My classmate. I don't remember anyone with that name though. And the Mist Boy was sure he memorized the names of all the hero students after hanging out with Class 1A as a peace offering before the sports festival. A part of him balked at the thought of forgetting his own classmates from 1B on top of forgetting a year of his education and hero training. Aizawa transferred into the hero course after the sports festival. That must be why you have no recollection of your friendship with him, said the creature. The psychiatrist in charge of him added, as I said during our first meeting, you seem to be missing a year's worth of memories. We are not sure if it exceeds that since we haven't done a full evaluation, only a partial one. The boy nodded along with the explanations. He had a lot of questions, some already asked and some not. Did his friends and classmates know what had happened to him? Did his family at the orphanage know? He clenched both his hands, his nails digging into both the flesh underneath the mist and the palm of his normal hand. What about everyone at the orphanage? Did they know this? All of this? A mist-covered hand gestured at his body, a bit of hatred at his own condition seeping through the small gesture unconsciously, but only to trained eyes. It was once again Nezu who provided him with an answer. They cannot be informed due to the nature of the case you are involved with. Therefore, unfortunately, they still think you are dead. However, when we have finished combing through her background and observing her, one in Nishai Yukio might be informed of your situation. His mind provided him with flashes of his time at the place he had called home since he was merely 5 years old with a constant stuffy nose. Well, until a Nishai Obasan gave him a nasal strip. He just hoped that Takeo and all of his siblings at the orphanage were now enjoying their lives with great parents and that Nishai Obasan was still happily managing the orphanage with her kind smiles and wise words. Who were these strangers in the foreign memories? Dead. He fought and succeeded in not flinching at the last word. He had been as good as dead for more than half a year, maybe even worse than dead considering what was done to him, what was done to his body and mind. But then again, no one knew what exactly was done to him. The case I'm involved with. You mean, whoever did this to me? Oboro questioned. Whoever kidnapped me. And from the mortuary too, if I understand what you are saying. Well, the exact circumstances of your initial kidnapping are still not known yet. Rest assured, we are looking into it. Nezu continued. Since you are to be put under the Victim Protection Program, you have two choices as to where you are going to live after the hospital has deemed you well enough to be discharged. It made sense because the former hero student had asked once what date it was and he realized that he was already past his 18th birthday. Therefore, child services would not be called into this matter since he was legally an adult. He nodded, so the mammal started counting off the first option with his paw. The first one is what most of the victims get. It is a protective safe house with security systems and some guards, either the police or heroes, assign. The second one would be to live with a guardian capable of protecting you and eligible to provide for your needs and your safety according to the program's requirements. Nezu continued after a brief pause. Since all guardians of UA students have to sign partial guardianship over to UA, the teachers at UA, including the headmaster, can act as the student's guardian in accordance with the loco parentis law. Oboro blinked. So, are you saying what I think you are saying? Yes, the third principal answered. You may choose to live on the campus as a ward of UA as the school is qualified for the requirements of the protection program. Furthermore, the school's security system has recently got an update. We will also be providing you with proper health care along your road to recovery while you are living at the UAS dorms. Also, there will be at least one teacher present at the dorms since Seal is currently living there, too. The black-clad hero nodded at the teen. For some reason, his eyes showed that he was smiling even though the lower half of his face was masked. His Purple Highness, the hero who was your supervisor during your internship, has not been informed of your presence due to secrecy matters. But if he is informed, I am sure that his agency will be willing to provide for you too. So, you do not have to worry about any financial or living problems, Nezu finished. The teen took a beat before saying, I see. Do I get some time to think it over, sir? He would hate to not go back to his home and show in Nishai Obasan that he was still alive. He would also hate to endanger the orphanage where there were so many children and civilians. It was not like going back to the orphanage was an option in the first place. Therefore, he would have to just make do with the two options he had been presented with. Becoming a ward of UA and living there would be what he was the most familiar with. After all, he could still remember the 2 or so months of being a first year at the esteemed school. Living in a separate safe house would also mean that more resources would have to be set aside for him and his protection. UA was already quite a safe place due to its tight security system, and from what Nezu had just said, that system had just become tighter. Of course, depending on the state of your physical health and also your mental one, the principal informed, you will be discharged from the hospital in around 3 or so weeks. So, I'd say you can take 2 weeks to dwell on this. Oboro nodded. A part of him knew that he was already favoring a certain choice in his mind. Then, he started a question, how about? Only to trail off in his own uncertainty. Nezu just smiled encouragingly at him. At least the teen thought the expression on the principal's face was supposed to be encouraging. Yes. The boy, half covered in wisps of purple mist, swallowed, his mouth suddenly too dry and a hint of headache settling behind his left eye and around his left temple. When he opened his mouth, he was a bit disgruntled to hear his shaky voice. Is there any chance that I will be able to resume my studies on heroics? Is there any chance that I will be back to normal, or as normal as I can be? Excuse him. He wanted nothing to do with heroics. The third principal looked towards the 2 doctors present in the hospital room, his black eyes asking for a professional opinion for his question. That depends on how fast or slow you will recover, started his psychiatrist, who was a dark-haired lady with red-rimmed glasses on her face. However, since recovery is never linear, I cannot estimate the time. But I have faith that you will be okay at the end of the day. The best care will be provided for you, so I am sure you will be able to continue studying for your heroic career someday. The doctor beside her spoke up. If I may, the results of most physical tests do not show any particularly serious health concern. Your body is, even though its current state is quite particular, in the best shape it can be according to those tests. He paused for a bit in thought before continuing. The only things left for you to be as fit as possible are to raise your current nutrition levels, to regulate your stress-induced headaches, and to administer physical therapy and, of course, also quirk counseling. The man with green-tinted scales on his face and hands concluded, a slight smile on his face. Oh, the teen said, I must admit it is quite nice to know those things. Thank you both for answering me honestly. No need. I am merely doing what I ought to do. Ditto, lad. No problem at all. Nezu piped up. Since we are hopeful that you will be able to study the heroics again after some time, I, as the principal of UA, can confirm that we are willing to accept you as a student again after you have recovered." A relieved smile appeared on Abaro's split face, the mist on his left cheek moving along with his face muscles. It was nice that the mist was not covering the whole left side of his face. His lower face was still bare. A certain group of friends would learn to appreciate this detail when Abaro had relearned to smile as wide and bright as he once did. "How about we start an agency together? All three of us working at an agency." "Huh, imagine that." "Thank you so much, Nezu-sensei." The furred creature smiled back before coming slowly near him and laying a paw on his right arm. "It's my pleasure to help you. To some extent, I can understand a bit of your situation. Therefore, don't worry. I got some help back when I was in your place. It is only reasonable that I make sure you get some help too." The mammal spoke softly so that the other occupants in the room did not hear. The teen blinked at those surprisingly kind and sympathetic words. Maybe there was more behind the rumored ruthlessness of Nezu, who was the vice principal then. That did not mean that he did not have that rumored ruthlessness though, only that he also had more than just that. The headmaster stepped away. "Is there anything you wish to know or anything you need?" Abaro bit his lower lip before deciding to say what he wanted to say. "I have just one request. Nezu-sensei, please, if you can and if it has been cleared, inform Nishai Oba-san of my condition. I don't want to worry her and make her grieve more than I have already done. I will see what I can do, but I cannot guarantee it, of course." Sighing in relief, the teen nodded before adding, "Oh, and I have one more question." Seeing the principal's nod, he continued, "Was any of my friends at UA close enough to me to deserve to know of my predicament? What about the classmate who you mentioned was there with me when I, died? Well, I remember that you had 3 close friends who, if I assume right, are still dealing with their loss. Do you want them to be informed too? How pitiful it was to not be sure who would mourned him when he died." The boy swallowed. "May I know who they are, sir?" "Aizawa Shouda, the one who had the same internship as you, Yamada Hazashi, one of your classmates at Class 1B, and Kayama Nimuri. I think the last one is your senior since she has already graduated." Abaro nodded. "I see. I remember Yamada." He had quite a loud mouth. He could not help but smile at the memory of the only apparently close friend of his that he could remember. Actually, he could picture the blonde and he was hitting off quite well. Both of their vibes would be complementary if he might say so himself. Even though he would have enough patience to deal with that kind of person if necessary, it would be tiring to do so. He'd rather not deal with anyone at all. The teen saw a flicker of purple and yellow at the corner of his vision, and as usual, he ignored how it was big enough to be a human. It was not important. I will admit that allowing him to be reintroduced to the people of his past memories might be beneficial in gaining his memories back, his psychiatrist said. However, I understand if the patient's aforementioned friends did not pass the searching stage and cannot be informed. I would love to get to know them again. Nezu-sensei. Abaro succeeded in keeping the pain from his headache out of his voice, but his left eye felt like it would burst out of its eye socket. If he still had an eye socket on that side. But he must still have it, right? That was what the doctor said. This right here was the so-called stress-induced headaches. Abaro just did not understand. He was not under stress at all. Then, why did these headaches keep springing out of nowhere? It was because he was not completed. Nezu hummed, similar to in Nishai-san. "I will see what I can do about this matter. Now, we will leave you to your rest. Good day to you, Shirakumo-kun." Pain spiked at his left temple, especially at the last word. "Again, thank you so much for everything, Nezu-sensei. Thank you for helping me that day too, Zeal." Abaro forced himself to be as natural as possible as he said his thanks. But he did not have to force the gratitude he felt in the smile he wore. "My pleasure," the principal replied before opening the door. The hero nodded at him. "No need. I'm glad that I was able to help you too." The boy was still smiling, albeit through a certain amount of pain from his headache, as the door closed behind the 2 heroes who just left. Tenko could not help but stare at his foster guardian's pros persitha that metal fake-like thingy whenever he could without being caught. Now, he was staring at it again as he sat on the floor, working on his drawing. His red eyes were on the metallic appliance since the man was in the single sofa directly opposite to him, reading a book. Tenko was really making sure that he was not obvious. "Tenko, is there anything on my prosthetic?" a jovial voice asked. The blue-haired boy flinched in surprise and, dare he say it, fear. He immediately snapped his head down and kept his eyes firmly on his formerly forgotten drawing. How did he get caught? A chuckle pried his attention away from the colored paper. Tenko looked up and saw that Ishikawa-san was now standing and out of his chair, his book laid on the table beside the sofa. The boy instinctively swallowed. A part of his mind whispered the same thing it had done when his father had gotten mad at him for some reason. Slowly back away. Or call mom. All the while some other parts reassured him that if the man did something messed up to him, he would be able to defend himself. Those parts were the ones they made his left hand inch towards the other to take off his artistic glove. However, thankfully, those kinds of parts were not the majority. Ishikawa-san blinked at him, stopping for a moment before smiling at him. It was the kind of smile that made his eyes seem squinted. It was the kind of smile Tenko wished his father would have aimed at him. The older man slowly lowered himself into a sitting position where he was standing some distance away from him on the floor, both of his legs steadily spread straight in front of him. "It's okay. You can stare at it however much you like, Sprout." The man smiled and knocked twice on his fake leg. "In fact, if you want to know, I can tell you a bit about how this prosthetic works." Tenko blinked. "Really? Of course, kid. Now, you can come a bit closer if you want to, too. That might make it easier for me to point its parts out." The child took a moment to consider. The red eyes were looking back and forth between the metal leg and the man's kind face. Finally, he nodded and went closer to the man, but still not too close, just close enough to be able to see the smaller parts and marks on the fake leg. "Alrighto, so I will spare you the details of why I had to get this metal leg," started Ishikawa-san. Then, the rest of the time until dinner was spent learning how to pronounce the word prosthetic, and listening to the man talking about why he needed it and how it worked in terms that Tenko could easily understand. The warmth that had been building during those activities did not leave him even after sleeping and then waking up again. Since that one evening they spent together, Tenko started feeling more comfortable around Ishikawa-san. Then, the man told him to call him by his name as he did to Mizuki-san. Ishikawa-san chuckled. "It is only fair that I get called by my first name, and it will definitely make me not feel left out. I won't be able to take it if only you and Mizuki are buddies. Not all three of us." The man clenched his chest as if he was hurt before grinning and wiggling his eyebrows. Tenko could only do his best not to smile at the man. Whenever he wore that expression, the boy could not help but think Ishikawa-san looked a bit silly. It was clear that the older man wanted him to call him by his first name, so he started calling him that. Rin-san also said that he wanted to become buddies with Tenko, too. And Tenko sort of wanted to become buddies with the older man, too. He was interesting. He could not sleep. For some reason, it felt like there was something, some imagined grain of sand, under his eyelids, especially the left one. So, Oboro just gave up on trying to sleep and was now staring at the ceiling. The hospital room was softly bathed in the white light from the corridor that came through the relatively small door window. After some time, the ceiling became boring and not interesting enough to drown out his thoughts. He turned sideways to face the window. Then, he turned to the other side, facing the door. Then, he tried laying on his stomach, but that was definitely not comfortable for him. Finally, the adolescent sighed and sat up. A mist-covered hand came up to rub his nape before he tried to stretch his limbs. Still in his hospital bed. It was then that something caught his eyes. A misty and dark form, to be exact, standing just to the left of the window through which some light entered the room. Flickering wisps of dark strands and a pair of glowing yellow eyes made up quite the image of a horror movie character. But the stranger himself seemed harmless and calm. However, he knew that appearances could be deceiving. That appearance could change in a blink, whether it was just an almost healed scratch on your cheek or half of your body sprouting wisps of dark mist, not unlike those of the stranger who was currently the focal point of his vision. He noted that the other individual was dressed formally, almost identical to his bartending teacher. Wait, his bartending teacher? Had Oboro been learning bartending before all of this? Before his death? "What's your hobby, Shouta?" "Mine is making all kinds of drinks." By drinks, I mean the kinds that we can find in a bar. "Sleeping is my hobby." "Wait, Shouta, no." "Shouta, yes." "Hazashi, come and tell Shouta sleeping can't be a hobby." Blinking at the sudden onslaught of phantom feelings and memories that he should have already known, he found himself questioning if this Shouta had been his friend. Maybe the new student that Principal Nezu mentioned. And if he and Yamada became closer friends. He internally shook his head so as to refocus on the situation at hand. After all, the figure near the window could be a villain or someone who had no business being in his room. The mist stranger did not seem to be a healthcare officer or an employee at this hospital. He could very well be in danger. But somehow, a part of him felt like this was what he should have been. This stranger was what he should have been and could have been. "Who are you and what are you doing in my room?" The yellow glare of the stranger caught him off guard as he turned towards Oboro. It was so familiar. Why? His subconscious knew why. The mist man's appearance was just the same as his left side. This form was what he was supposed to be had the villains who experimented on him succeeded. Then, why was he seeing the stranger? Was this a hallucination? Was he going insane? "I need to go back to him." The stranger, the other him, uttered in a deep yet scratchy voice. Oboro furrowed his brow. Kirigiri, the hallucination, could talk. He could hear the other him talk. Who did the other him mean by him? Was he ... Was he going to take over Oboro's body? Was Oboro going to stop existing again? Maybe even death. His mismatched hands fisted the hospital standard blanket. The hair on the back of his neck stood up and his breathing sped up. He knew that this was not ideal. He knew that he was starting to panic. He swallowed and it just made him aware of how dry his mouth had gone. The other him, no, the hallucination took a step closer to Oboro. What if he lost control of his quirk again? What if he lost control of his body? The other took another step and then another. He flung the blanket off his body as he got out of the hospital bed so hastily that he almost tripped. Breathing heavily, he stared at the figure across the bed who had now stopped moving and was silently and creepily staring at him in return. Then, something snapped and he saw the figure lunge toward him. The rest was a blur, and suddenly, when he regained his senses, he had locked himself in the bathroom attached to his hospital room. His back was against the door, facing toward the mirror that just showed how he did not look like himself anymore and how the mist on his left side was flickering harshly like the waves during a windy storm. Oboro scanned the small yet brightly lit bathroom and breathed a sigh of relief when he did not find any foreign strangers or hallucinations. Yes, because that was certainly a hallucination. It was all in Oboro's head. This was really messed up. He sighed deeply again before trudging towards the sink to splash his face with the cold water from the tap. Oboro stared at his reflection in the mirror. All kinds of thoughts that screamed that his appearance was both right and wrong were starting to get overwhelming. He tried to control his breathing as his eyes strayed to the shelves around the mirror. That was when he found a familiar nasal strip packet sitting innocently on the second row of the shelf on the left. Before he knew it, he had already torn open one of them. Now, all that was left was to actually use it even though he technically did not need it due to the changed nature of his quirk and his lack of quirk usage. And use he did. His blue and gold eyes seemed to be stuck on how the nasal strip was on the bridge of his nose where it had always been. Slivers of dark purple mist slipping out from beneath the left side of the strip. He experimentally touched and ran his fingers along the cool surface of the strip, taking comfort in the strangely soothing action. The nasal strip should not have helped this much, but it did. It cemented the fact that Oboro, was still in control. Not whatever the heck he was supposed to be according to the villain's plan. He was still Shirakumo Oboro, a hero in training who was just taking a detour to improve his health. This state was just like a bus stop, kind of annoying to wait for a long time, but somewhere that would take him to his desired destination. Oboro could do this. Izuku was on his way back to UA. In fact, he was sitting in a train car, being the plain civilian version he always was except during his work hours. But what he was looking at on the phone was anything but related to civilian business. No, he was staring at the notification that said he had got many emails from all sorts of sources via the hero network. The police, some underground heroes and some Twilight heroes to name a few. Sir Nighteye, to name the one who sent the email he was currently reading. This was not the outcome he foresaw when he decided to offer help in quirk and criminal analysis on this site under his hero alias Zeal. After all, Zeal was just a new hero. He sort of graduated from the rookie level because of how many criminals and villains he captured in the relatively short time that he had served as an underground hero, prowling through alley after alley and hopping from rooftop to rooftop. He wondered who would ever want him to do analysis, but he still updated his HeroNet profile. At first, it was only a case with a 3-minute-long blurry video as the only information source. But it all turned out well after Izuku noticed that the villain kept becoming intangible and deduced that they had an illusion quirk which apparently worked a bit less efficiently on video judging from the blur in it. Then, it all went downhill from there. Or maybe uphill. Izuku was not sure since he was getting more and more workload on top of his patrols and his classes, but on the other hand, he rather liked his analysis supporting and being utilized in villain capture and crime solving. It made him wonder if he would have been an analyst for heroes if Toshinori-sen never offered him one for all. It made him wonder if his analysis skills would have been useful had he been a quirkless underground hero. Izuku was starting to realize that the underground heroics were a tight-knitted community, not to mention very close-guarded. Even on the HeroNet, the profiles of underground heroes only indicated their hero code and which kind of additional abilities they had, such as being able to work as paramedics, undercover specialists, trainers, or analysts. Access to their full profiles was only given to the top 10 heroes and the higher-ups of the HPSC. The sheer amount of secrecy and privacy was refreshing for Izuku. He blinked at his phone screen as it turned off due to inactivity. So, he took that as a sign to put away his phone and just take some moments to think and try to deal with the realization that he now had heroes looking forward to receiving his analysis. They were counting on the underground hero, Zeal, to provide them with all the info that could be scraped off on the suspects or villains, or the info on themselves that could be used to develop themselves better. Not on the symbol of hope, Deku. And he at least had the self-awareness to acknowledge that it was better, as he had always suspected that the others only wanted his input and analysis only because of his position as the symbol of hope, standing since his stop was approaching. Izuku internally promised to look over all the emails in his inbox tonight. He took purposeful strides to quickly make his way back to UA. However, something halted him. Midoriya-san. Izuku, in a moment of mindlessness, looked back in the direction of the voice which called out his name, his original name, only to see the familiar, if younger than what he became accustomed to, sight of Midoriya and Co. At once, his breath left his lungs, staring at the form of his mother who was now talking with another person, presumably the one who called out to her. He was still staring when the two parted their ways after Izuku's mother was given the bag that she apparently forgot. He was still staring when she hopped into the train just a moment before the door closed. He was still staring when she noticed him staring through the glass of the door window and stared back in what could possibly be confusion. He was still staring when the train left him, just like how he had left his mother back in his original world. So, no one could not blame him for or accuse him of purposely overworking himself by reading through emails and replying to them with confirmations of accepting the request in them as soon as he arrived at his dorm on UA campus. No one could not even accuse him that he was using his work to run away again. After all, work was work. A focused mind while analyzing was a focused mind while analyzing. Feelings were feelings, and promises were promises. Who was he to break yet another promise again? He had broken enough promises. Seal, now at the Jaku General Hospital. Shigaraki has been confirmed to have gone back home. Will proceed as planned. Nezu sipped his steaming tea as his dark eyes rested on the message that was sent 4 minutes ago. He knew that no more messages would pop up since Seal would not be using this means of communication while on the move. No, they would be using the earpiece communicator that Nezu had specifically designed, which had its own private network. So far nothing had come through that communicator too. However, that was completely the norm since they agreed not to talk to themselves unless something noteworthy had come up, as long as his calculations were right. The underground hero would still be cautiously searching the place where All for One's doctor did all his dirty work. Oh, one might question why they specifically chose the Jaku Hospital. First of all, Dr. Garaki Kyudai was the chairman of Jaku General Hospital, and Garaki was the villain alias of the despicable doctor that All for One employed. Secondly, but more certainly, Midoriya had guaranteed that something would be found at that location since in his timeline there had been a very high-profile and enormous raid at the hospital to take down the doctor and detain all the nomas that had been created. If Nezu's observations were right, that raid did not end very well, judging from the tightness in the traveler's expression as he relayed the information to the creature. After patiently and vigilantly waiting for almost 50 minutes, a message came through. Seal did not find Garaki at the location, but the mission is somewhat successful in terms of surveillance. OMW back to UA. ETA 20 minutes. The principal of UA let out a pleased hum. Even though it was late at night, he was still in his office. He practically lived on UA campus, so there was no need to worry about how late it had become. He swirled his armchair to face the glass window behind his desk, which only showed the night sky upon the campus and the city beyond. ETA 20 minutes. That quirk of Midoriya's was quite convenient, wasn't it? It was almost as if he had separate quirks instead of just one. Nezu had his own speculations, but he would never voice them until he deemed himself and Midoriya ready to confront the subject. After all, that discussion would be quite intriguing. He admittedly could not control his curiosity, but what he could control was how and when he satisfied his curiosity. The creature maintained his ever-present smile as Zeal reported back to him. Apparently, Garaki indeed had a secret workplace at Jaku General Hospital, just as Midoriya expected. However, the place was in the process of being prepared for something and no equipment or Namu prototypes had been present. However, there were signs of the beginning of what could be a functional lab. Thus, the next logical course of action would be to try and gather more info, so it was time for Nezu to put that one new camera he had programmed when he was bored and Midoriya's apparent skills at stealth into good use. Midoriya, do you think it would be successful if you were to go back there once more and implant this device in an appropriate location inside the lab? The underground hero did not even hesitate before saying, "Yes, sir. It would have the most probability of success if I head there immediately, since Garaki would not be there and there would be less insulation and traps because as of now, they had not been installed yet." Nezu stayed silent since he knew the other had more to add. "My only concern is that it might be discovered during further renovation." "Well, I would, of course, be alerted if this device is destroyed or detached or meddled in any way. Hence, feel free to go back again, Midoriya." Zeal gave him a firm nod in response and raised his mask to his face from its former place around his neck before saying, "Nezu, I have a request. Yes, I do not mean to be disrespectful, but I think it would be better to not use my former name anymore. After all, it is no longer my name and my civilian name is Akatani Mikumo. If we are overheard, it would be more problematic than needed to explain, sir." The principal observed the hero as he elaborated. Even though he did his best to hide the tension under his dark hero costume, the eyes of the high-specs user still caught on. Ah, the time was here, then. He predicted this as one of the possible outcomes. How interesting. He would be looking forward to how the future would become indeed. "Of course, I understand, Akatani." Zeal gave him another nod and exited his office, leaving Nezu alone with his thoughts and oh so delightful speculation. He was familiar with wanting to embrace and make a new name for oneself while abandoning an old and disliked name. However, he was not familiar with having to embrace the new name that was made for one while abandoning an old name, but something that they had identified themselves with quite contentedly. This was his chance to observe. I will need you to sign these non-disclosure agreements before we move to the next activity on our agenda for today's meeting. Nezu slid 3 files toward each of them. Shouta hesitantly grabbed his, contemplating whether the next couple of moments would be worth it to sign the forms. He knew that, logically, the principal would not trick them. The creature would use more subtle means to do so if he really wanted to. Plus, all 3 of them would have already been in his paws before they even knew. Yes, all 3 of them, because Kayama was also there despite having already graduated from UA. Maybe they were needed in a high-profile mission. Why do we have to sign this? Yet, he still questioned, just because he did not want to immediately do as the rat said. The principal hummed, "For one, what I am about to reveal to you is quite a sensitive matter. Moreover, you are only going to be informed about this because we have determined that it would be beneficial to all parties involved in this case." Well, here we go. Then, Yamada was already signing away beside him. I would hate to miss out on a mission just because I could not guarantee that my mouth was secure. Such a great spirit, Hazashi. I'm in, too. Kayama followed suit, which left only Shouta to hesitantly hover his pen over the bare space where his signature should be, but only for a moment because he was already signing too. Nezu accepted the copies of all of their individual NDAs. Shouta rubbed the paper of their own copy in his hands with his thumb. Since that is done and out of the way, I am sure you all will be quite interested in this. They were handed a file each again. Shouta's eyes, which were usually narrowed with tired sleepiness, immediately became alert and wide as he took in the photo of someone on the very first page of the file. His hands clenched, not caring if he was crumpling both the file and the contract. Nezu, what is the meaning of this? No one could blame Shouta for his shaky voice, not if they actually knew what exact bizarre irrationality was there in the file. Quite interested, his ass. Nezu-sensei, I really hope you're not joking. Even Yamada sounded as tired as Shouta usually was when he said that. It was somewhat bizarre to hear him let it show through his voice. Rest assured, Yamada, I am not joking at all. This is indeed the truth. Why else would you be required to sign an NDA? Shouta forced the breath he was unconsciously holding out of his lungs and forced himself to breathe in again, as much as he could in one go. His heart was racing on some invisible track as he scanned the file in his hands. The file that showed Shirakumo Aburo was not dead at all, just deformed, amnesiac, and apparently alive. Alive, when Shouta had seen his body covered with a white cloth stain with red, blood red, being carried out with a stretcher after being dug out of a pile of concrete and bricks with his own eyes. Kayama took off her visor, the coat that was a part of her hero costume being unusually buttoned close, a sign that she was Kayama instead of Midnight. How? She sighed. I'm afraid I cannot go extremely into detail, but it appears that Shirakumo's body was not guarded safely enough and was experimented on. We are currently trying to apprehend the villain responsible, but there is more than meets the eye. Nezu took a sip before continuing. The hero who rescued him was trying to save a child kidnapped by the said villain, and he came across Shirakumo. Such a miraculous event it was. Shouta's eyes took in all the information available on the file and noticed that the hero's name was not mentioned at all. The lack of information about the hero himself and the events of the rescue clued Shouta in that it must have been an underground hero. After all, they came across more organized crime than the Limelight heroes, who would only be recruited after the underground heroes, and the police had gathered enough information to organize a raid. This just hardened his resolve to go into the underground heroics even more. Who was it? Shouta asked, wanting to take the chance if Nezu was willing to reveal more information. It was an underground hero, he called it, named Seal. There was an infuriating smile on the rat's face for some reason. It was grating Shouta's nerves. That was the kind of smile when the principal knew something they did not know but would discover in due time, especially if it was irrational for them not to know that something. Zeal, huh? Kayama repeated. Sounds like a good hero. She was smiling sadly down at the photo on the first page of the file. The photo showed the new appearance of their friend who came back from death. Dark purple tendrils of mist were apparent even in photos. So was the glowing yellow of Aburo's left eye. He is. Nezu smiled wider. Shouta internally promised to find this hero and thank him in person, even if Aburo was not quite the same. This hero Zeal brought him back to them, but it should all come only after seeing Aburo. When can we see Aburo? Shouta naturally questioned. Unknown to him, both Yamada and Kayama perked both at the question and at how he used their friend's first name. But all 3 of them knew that this would be the chance to let themselves heal and be healed. Zeal-san, you're here. I am here, said Hiro, let out a laugh as he knelt down in front of Tenko and handed him a packet of mini buns the child had come to associate with comfort. Here you go, buddy. You still like this, right? He accepted the snack and smiled down at the sight of it in his gloved hands. Yes, Zeal-san. Ah, that's great then. I was worried you wouldn't like this. A big hand settled on his head and ruffled his hair. He could not even pretend to be annoyed. It was all the child could do to not reveal how warm this gesture made him feel. Rin-sen also did this a lot, but it was easier to do so than when Zeal-sen gave him head pats. A part of him was still wary of this kind of contact, but the majority enjoyed it. That nice lady he went to weekly said he could always ask them not to touch him if he was truly uncomfortable, but it was also not wrong to like being given head pats. Rin-san and Mizuki-san had been encouraging him to go and talk to her. Tenko might have to admit that the lady was nice to talk to. She gave him all sorts of advice. Of course, there was always the fact that he could reject a piece of advice privately. The contract that said she could not reveal anything he said to her unless under very specific conditions was also a plus. His red eyes focused on what was behind his hero, or rather who was behind his hero. Standing a few paces behind was a very tall and big man with blonde hair with two bangs falling down on each side of his face. He was watching Tenko and Zeal-sen with a big smile. Everything about this man felt big. You've noticed I've brought a guest. Tenko would rather the hero came by himself without any tag-alongs, but he was also curious about the stranger. The child immediately stepped closer to the underground hero, who was still kneeling, his body angled so that he could introduce the child and the stranger to each other. Yagi-san, this charming boy here is Shimura Tenko. Buddy, this is Yagi Toshinori. He's a friend of mine and he knew your grandmother. The hero laid a comforting hand on his shoulder. He stared up at the Yagi, the tree man. Tenko decided to call him the tree man because he was big and tall. He reminded him of those high trees that would have yellow leaves in summer. Besides, he did not think even Zeal-san would be as big as him. You knew Mako-basen. The tree man was still smiling and he plopped down into a sitting position on the floor. Even then, Tenko was still shorter than him. Even Zeal-san was shorter than him and his hero was also tall and strong. Yagi tilted his head. I knew your grandmother from your father's side, young Shimura. Her name was Shimura Nana. That would mean that photo. His father's mother was a hero. Seeing as Tenko did not say anything, the tree man continued, she was my mentor. She taught me a lot. You actually remind me a bit of her in terms of appearances. Young Shimura. The tree man was her student. So that would mean Yagi might also be a hero, or at least have a hero-related job. But of course, Tenko did not know anything for sure. Oh, I didn't know I look a bit like her. Tenko replied and paused to think if he was really going to do what he was going to do. I know that she was a hero though. And you said she taught you. So, tell me, tree man. A cough came from Tenko's right, from where Zeal-san was. Are you a hero too? Yagi seemed surprised for a moment before smiling again. I see you are a thoughtful young man. That thinking process was interesting too. However, whether I am a hero or not, his smile widened even more, is a secret. Then, the tree man burst into hearty laughs. Tenko stared at the man, not sure whether he should laugh along due to the sheer familiarity of Yaga's laugh or whether he should get annoyed at the man's answer. I always knew Tenko is quite thoughtful and intelligent, chuckled Zeal-san as he patted Tenko's back. Yagi stopped laughing. Young man, I would love to get to know you if that's okay with you. Tenko was definitely going to get this man to answer whether he was a hero or not. He just wanted to know if he was right and if letting this man talk to him was the price he was willing to pay. Besides, Zeal-san said Yagi was his friend, didn't he? Zeal-san, wait. I have something to say to you. Izuku Amakuma looked back to see a certain boy. Tenko. He gave a smile to the civilian form of All Might. Yagi-san, please go ahead. I'll follow you in a few moments. It's okay, Zeal. Take your time. I'll be waiting for you near the gates. The underground hero nodded and traced his steps back. What is it, Tenko? The boy was holding something behind his back, but Makumo could not see it. Also, he was not meeting his eyes. There's something I want to ask you. He knelt down so that Tenko would not feel uncomfortable with him looming above. Oh, go ahead, buddy. A few beats passed before Tenko spoke. Can you sign this for me? Suddenly, a blank page along with a pen was given to him. The boy was asking for his autograph. He accepted the items before saying, You know I am an underground hero, right? I don't care. I want your autograph, Tenko humphed. Besides, isn't that what you're supposed to do when you like a pro hero? This made Makumo feel as if he was once again a young rookie hero in his second year during his first internship after obtaining the professional hero license. He couldn't help but smile. He never thought he would get to experience this feeling again. You're correct. Okay, this is my first time, so you'll have to forgive me if my autograph doesn't look good. All right. The thing was, he had not even thought about making an autograph with his new hero name. Zeal and Deku were two vastly different heroes. Being Zeal was relatively new to him, but he scrawled a decent sign of his hero name into the page. It was not bad if he said so himself. He noticed that Tenko had recently had a haircut, and as the visit went on, he had begun to think that the style almost resembled his own. The only difference was that his hair was a tad curlier than Tenko's. Tenko had got attached to him, hadn't he? And this was his first autograph as Zeal, too. He was getting all sorts of excitement today. First hearing All Might referred to as a tree man and now this. But he was not complaining at all. Yagi was smiling as always as he said, young Shimura sure admires you, Seal. You're his idol. Mikumo could not will down the blush he was now sporting underneath his mask. I would not say that. I don't think I am anyone's idol. Unlike you, Yagi. Everyone idolizes you. It's just a part of heroics for me. Sometimes, it even gets in the way of my work. I sometimes wonder how nice it must be to be an underground hero. It would have been a treat to see you as an underground hero, sir. As one of your fans, I've wondered about that too. Mikumo was still smiling as he got into the driver's seat of All Might's car as he was going to be driving for their trip back to UA. They were to head there after the visit to further discuss the operations against All for One and his forces, both the finished ones and the upcoming ones, along with any info that they might have gathered since their latest weekly meeting. As must as it'd be to see you as a Limelight hero. Zeal, why did you not become a Limelight hero? With Nezu's backing, you would have been quite a successful pro hero. Mikumo stilled as he fastened the seatbelt. The memories of Toshinori saying he was going to be a successful hero flooded his senses, even though the person beside him was not his mentor-turned-father figure. I only wanted to help people in general and you with All for One. So, he shrugged, operating underground was the best choice, not to mention safe from both the public eye and All for One because of the anonymity of working underground. Maybe that despicable man would dig up my identity in no time as soon as I was on his radar, even I'm underground. But it's best that no one would notice anything amiss when something happened to me. Then, Mikumo blinked, and, thank you for the compliment. I'm honored that you would think I'd make a successful hero. Oh, don't mention it, Yagi chuckled. Although I am now more certain that you'd thrive as a Limelight hero, I'm sure you and Nezu did what you thought was the best. I can understand your reasoning and wholly support your decision. You'd make a great hero either above ground or underground. Mikumo felt as if his whole head was a boiling kettle, red with heat. He would not be surprised if there was steam coming out of his face. Thank you, Yagi. Even in this timeline, even in this world, you don't know how much this means to me. Yagi Toshinori still thought he would be a great hero,